on?
Yep, I can see people popping
There it
on.
is. There it is. Okay.
All right. Oh, look, Jim and Chris are on. Hi, Jim and Chris. We're getting on board early here just to make sure everything checks out, because this is the first time that I've actually ever done one of these. So we're going to give people a little bit of time to gather in, since this thing officially starts at 10 o'clock our time, Ohio time. And you know, I might just tinker with clay a little bit, and then once this officially starts, I'm going to pick this camera up and walk around and give you a little tour of where I work and what I do, and show you tools and stuff. So just another 10 minutes, and I'm just going to push clay around here and let more people tune in at the official hour. So cool. All right. Well,
I'm not seeing comments or anything. Can you ask if people can hear you?
can everybody hear me on there?
You need somebody to start taking this.
Hi, Vincent.
I'm not seeing anything.
Cool. Karum, can you hear me? Yes. Dan the Dynamic Menace says yes. Okay, good. Karum can hear. We're good. But you're not seeing the comments?
I'll have to figure it out. No,
Okay.
it's not coming up.
Okay, what we were going to do here, and Kara's getting up to speed over there where she is while I'm working, she's going to be sort of feeding me your comments, so I don't have to keep rubbernecking here and
There they are.
going back and forth. So that's what's going to happen, and I think she's getting up to speed. And that way she can feed me the comments and I can answer them without having to keep turning around and watch them. And that way you guys can watch me work while I'm doing this. Hi, Lori. Good to see you. Arnie Goldman. Hi, Sprite. Great to see you too, Arnie. There's Linda. Okie doke. I'm just going to let everybody, in about 5 minutes, I'll officially start this thing and we'll walk around and take a look at my little studio. I have a little outdoor studio out there in my garage area, and that's where I make a big mess, and a lot of the gritty part of the sculpture happens. So what I've done here is I've got an armature sort of laid up with clay, because the reason I laid it up with clay to start with is that I didn't want you guys to have to sit for 45 minutes watching me push clay onto a foam head. So this way I can get into the meat of the sculpture while you're here, rather than have you sit around, you know, bored waiting for me to get the Sculpey pushed onto the head, because it takes a while. So I'd be for the better part of, Chris Wallace is in the house.
Okay, so you have, Jeannot is asking, is this your studio? It looks like a wonderful place.
This is my studio, yes. This is where I do the finer tuned sculpting. This is where I make the clay part of this happen. And in this case I'm using Sculpey. I like Sculpey a lot. And the only reason that I'm particular to Sculpey for the most part, there's a number of reasons, but one of them is that I just grew up with it. I just Ooh, Jordu is here.
Chris Wayless wants
Yeah.
to know, do you always use references?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and it's all over the place, but yes, I always use reference. I don't do a lot of sketching anymore, which I really should. You know, I have a picture in my head, and then I try to prove every wrinkle in reality before I ever just fake it. You know, so if there's a certain something I want to do, I start flipping through books and I look on Pinterest and I get what I need. And in this case, I found this creepy woman here that I've been wanting to do this piece for a long, long time. And I'm finally just, you know, when this opportunity came up, I said, hell with it. I'm just going to do it, you know, in front of God and everybody. And I don't know how far I'll get because I will muddle through, like I muddle through everything else. I'm not one of these guys I'm not a Jordu. Yeah, I watch Jordu work and it's like watching ballet, you know, because he just has this flow where he just starts laying muscles over bone, over this, over that, and then I love to watch him work. But that's the trained hands moving, and I know what I'm doing, but I don't work quite that way. I muddle, you know. I push clay on a little bit in a more clumsy fashion, and I just insist that I get what I get in the end, and that's kind of how it is. I just kind of force myself to make it right, and I don't know how else to explain that. So, can everybody see okay? Is everybody happy with the view? I mean, can one of you guys chime in and say, yeah, looks good, or closer, or whatever?
Well, you're going to move anyway.
I know I'm going to move, but, you know, I just want to, there's a thumbs up. Okay, we got thumbs up. Good. All right. Couple more minutes.
Karoom says, I'm happy with the view.
All right, good. Thanks, bud.
Says yes, looks
Yeah.
good. Chuck Williams says, yeah. Okay, so you're getting, yeah, they're saying good view.
Yeah.
Jared says he can see great, very clear.
See.
Janelle says your camera's better than some of the previous hosts, mind you.
Yeah, you know, thank you for that. I'm glad you noticed. I went out and bought, you know, I used to have what was it, piece of crap that I used to own?
Motorola.
The Droid, you know. It's like somebody smeared Vaseline on the lens. And,
Jordu says looks great, man, get going.
okay, all right. And I bought a Pixel, you know, and mostly for this, but I needed a thing anyway, so this pushed me into it. So I guess we can get started.
Yeah.
What I'd like to do to start off with here is, what I'm going to do is just sort of give you guys there's not a lot to see, but, you know, it's, well, my studio's got a lot to see, but I'm not going to show you my decorations as much as, there's Kevin. Kevin Merck is in the house. It's just a pleasant place to work. I tried to make my environment a pleasant place to work for a weirdo like me. So what we're going to do is, this is my, I found this big antique drawing table, and I got a big rubber mat on it so I don't destroy the surface, because I tend to beat the surfaces up where I work. I beat everything up. You guys can see over here, you can see my skull collection. And I have a keen interest in human anatomy. So, you know, this is all stuff that I just collect. And I think I've got somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 different human skulls with all different kinds of anomalies going on. There's, you know, and I've collected them over the years through friends have told me, oh yeah, family doctor had one and his son willed it to her and she didn't want it anymore and stuff like that. And I've gotten them from eBay. It's my...
Oh, you're wowing the collection.
Oh yeah, well, good.
Grant
Yeah.
says, ooh, man, let's go.
Yeah. Yeah, there's my latest acquisition is this very strange...
And yes,
Okay.
Purdue, I'm here.
Yeah.
He asked about me.
Yep. Well, who wouldn't? So anyway, that's this is my latest girl here. It's a female. She's kind of an odd build, and I just thought she was cool. And we drove across 2 states to get her. So, and my other 2 friends.
It looks like the Mutter Museum.
Yeah, it does. I'm a big fan of the Mutter Museum. Been there twice with some friends that were kind enough to take us when we went out to see them. Matt and Gina. So, anyway, I collect a lot of my friends' art here. You know, I got life cast mixed in and stuff like that, and I think I got it. There's a.
Mike Porter says love the Michael Berryman head cast.
Oh yeah. See, there's an original Brom drawing from the Plucker. Yeah, that's one of my. We traded that. We traded for that. Anyway.
I haven't yet.
Yeah.
Blake Lowe says, are those all real or cast too?
What's that?
Maybe
the skeletons. The skeletons are real.
And then those are cast up there. Right?
Oh yeah, well those are death masks from gorillas. I actually just got those a while back from. That's an orangutan, gorilla. I love life casts because they really belie what's going on a skin surface more so than skin sometimes, because there's a different quality to them where you can really look. And the other thing I do is, you know, I can't know how close I can get here, where they have incredible detail. Got them from bone clones, and I just sprayed them, gave them a nice bronze patina. You can see against my back wall there. It looks almost, but there's some gorilla things, and they had a little story about there was a German zoo that caught fire, and a lot of these apes died in the ape house, and they died from smoke inhalation and stuff, and so they made death mask of all of them, and I got them there. So
Jordu says, please show that monkey maquette.
The monkey maquette. Oh yes, this is actually not a maquette, Jordu. This is one of the projects I'm doing for a client, and it's going to be a flying monkey. Can you guys see that? So we should have got that turntable, and I'm just getting started here. And I'm going to explain a little bit about how this kind of thing happened when I go out to my garage studio. You guys see that okay?
Said, I'd love to know the type of clay you use.
Sculpey. Super Sculpey. The beige kind. Now, one thing of note where Sculpey is concerned is that is not my final stuff. That's it's what I cast on. I make a mold and I pour silicone into it. So it's not really. So I can show you a little bit of upstairs.
Peter Tyndall said hello, that he made it.
Hey Pete, all right.
Even though it's 3 a.m.
You are awesome, dude. Thank you for chiming in there in the other side of the world. This is our little living area up here. We have a nice little den, and this is kind of a recent piece that. Well, it's not really that recent now. It's old scratch with his soul contract. And, just some more artwork and stuff. There's a Virginie piece. This is one of our prized pieces here. Virginie's Witchcraft.
Oscar Young says, he said, is that the normal soft one? I find the gray firm to be way too hard.
Well, I'm going to address that in a couple of seconds. There's just another piece. This is Adelpha and her sister casting spells. You see that? Okay, well anyway, that's enough of that. We're going to go downstairs. Now, where Sculpey is concerned, I occasionally run into hard Sculpey and soft Sculpey, or getting older and stuff like that. And
Brian Larson says, I'm assuming your final casts are done in silicone.
Yeah, yes. The silicone is the end products. Platinum Cure silicone from Smooth On. I love Smooth On stuff. I'm showing you a meat grinder here. And the reason I'm showing that to you is what I like to do is I bust my Sculpey up and start pushing it through a meat grinder. And it's an old, yeah, I mean, there is no antique stores that don't seem to have 6 of these things laying around on shelves. And it's the cranky sausage maker style meat grinder, you know, that you see in antique stores. And I went out and bought one. My friend Rich Klink told me. I said, man, I got some Sculpey that's old, you know. And he says, oh, go get a meat grinder. So that's what I do. I grind it in a meat grinder. And it comes out and it's almost as soft as the day I bought it after I get through that, you know. And it gives you a good arm workout too. So it's a lot faster. What I'm going to show you here is this is kind of an armature setup that I make armatures with. And all I did was I took a skull. This is a Halloween skull from Big Lots, $10. I thought it was a pretty accurate, general looking skull, and it was all in one piece already. And I made a silicone mold. Just quickie, there's some crappy foam in there. A little silicone mold of that skull. I just kind of filled in between the zygomatic arch there so that the silicone didn't hook through it. And I made this mold. And that way I can make foam skulls. So this is what I do. There's a foam skull using Foam It 3 from Smooth On Corporation. Just mix it with a Jiffy mixer, equal parts. It's very easy to do. And then I make a foam head. And then from what I do from there is, over there is my belt sander.
Back to the meat grinder, Sandra Lira says, how many times through the meat grinder? Just once?
Yeah, it goes in one side and comes out the other, just like food. You know, so anyway, belt sander, and I take because not all, one of the reasons I love to collect human skulls is it's not all, I can't do this right.
What's going on?
Okay. One of the reasons that I shape it on a belt sander is because human skulls are very different from one another. They're like a fingerprint. Every single human being has a different skull from the next. But this gets you into a nice general shape. And then you take what it is you really want to sculpt and you shape it this into that, which is what I did. I took this piece of foam, I jammed it against that belt sander until I got what I got. And that's what's in the other room. And what I did was I drilled a hole up inside this. I shaped the bottom the way I wanted. I drilled a hole up inside of it, and then I mounted it on. I've got a ton of scrap wood over here I save, and I just sit there with my bandsaw and my scrap wood, and I create an armature using drywall screws and an electric screwdriver. And you know, this shop it looks like hell, but it really works for me. It's just there's all my molds over there, and you can see there's my, you know, it really is, it's super rudimentary, and I like it that way because the kind of work that I do makes a hell of a mess and when you get going. So
Kyle says, hi, Uncle Tom.
Hey, Kyle, my nephew. I love him.
Linda Ehrenfried says, sorry to go back to it again, but does the meat grinder discolor the clay?
No, it does not. No, I'll show you, Linda. I'll show you the end result of pushing it through the meat grinder once. This is my Roto cast machine here, and you can see I have to build a different contraption with every new mold that I have. So I don't know how many of you saw my skull of Edward Mordrake, but that's the housing that it fits in, and I just jam a silicone mold and slap it closed, and it's all done on a bandsaw and with some screws and stuff. So, okay, so that's enough of that. We're going to start sculpting. Let's see.
Sorry.
Yeah, don't do that. Okay. There's a couple of other things. There's Poe, Edgar Allan, just a bust this time. That was off the one that I made for Guillermo. Oh, real quick, the molds. I almost forgot. I gotta go. I'm sorry. this was bound to happen. Okay.
Jared said rotocasting.
Yeah, rotocasting. The molds. This, as far as silicone molds go, there's a lot of people that have different approaches. A lot of people do silicone into silicone. I didn't kind of grow up that way. So this is I was commissioned to do Al Capone recently. So this is my Al Capone mold, okay? And the way that's done is after you get it sculpted and everything is, one of the reasons I love Sculpey so much is that I can heat the clay up with a heat gun. I know Jordu talked about that, using a heat gun. And I just heat the surface of it up to get it, just the surface hard. And then I paint the whole thing with Johnson's paste wax, which is essential. If you do not do that and you paint the mold material on, you will lock it up better than super glue, and you can take the whole thing and toss it in the trash. So the paste wax is a key ingredient for the kind of molds that I make, which I use this stuff called Plasti Paste from Smooth On, and then this is epoxy coat. And I start out by coating it with epoxy coat. So that's the inside of Al Capone's mold. And you see that there's eyes in there, and I put those in after I pull the clay out. You ruin the original sculpt. And I just got a little bit of epoxy sculpt in there.
Jim and Chris say hi.
Hi, Jim and Chris.
And Sandra Lira said, did you make your own rotocaster?
No, I actually found that my buddy Chris at Smooth On said, hey, are you looking for a rotocaster? I said, yes. And he goes, okay, we know a guy who's selling one. And his business was ending, and he was doing all kinds of museum replicas and stuff. So I contacted him, and he had it shipped out to me, and I got it for about half of what you pay for a new one. That rotocaster new is about $6,000 now. It's from Manitron. It had some work that needed done on it. I have no idea how I did it. I fumbled through it. It broke, and I had to fix it and solder some stuff. It's just kind of a wacky thing.
Big Robin said, Tom, are you planning on doing any more workshops like the one you did at Smooth On?
Yeah, down the road. Chris and I are talking about stuff, yeah. So maybe late summer or in the fall, we're talking about it. I don't like to do workshops without Chris because he tends to really keep things focused and he helps me give you guys the most bang for your buck.
Jordu said, why is the image reversed, guys?
Why is it reversed?
Because you're doing the selfie mode thing.
Oh yeah. Okay. Am I in reverse?
Yeah.
Okay.
The room looks reversed.
Oh, all right. Well, okay.
So,
yeah.
all right.
Well, I just did that so I can see what you're seeing, so I know what to show you. All right. So, hey Dan, I got to set this up now to put it back on the sculpture.
You need to do a workshop in Atlanta.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's a force of habit, sweetie. Okay. We turn out our lights when we leave rooms here. We don't like paying for. We hear our fathers in our backgrounds going, "You're paying the light bill." So, all right. So okay. Now, let's get.
Hi, Tom Enos.
There he is.
And hi, Dan.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. There's a lot of people saying that it's the wee hours for them.
Oh, yeah, I appreciate that, guys.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to get so you have a real nice view of what it is I'm doing. I want to give you guys the best view I can.
Lars said, I appreciate the environmental commitment with a wink.
Yeah, my Facebook post.
Jared said he turns off the lights too.
Yeah. All right. So, Linda, you were asking about the clay and what it looks like. And this is unground clay right here. And this is ground clay, you know?
I am.
So you can see that all it does is mince it up, but the key thing it does is make it softer. So for about 15 or $20 over a meat grinder,
Brian Larson says, does Super Sculpey come in large bricks?
Yes. I buy it in a 22-some pound case. It's just a big box. And it comes in, you know, bricks of this. But a lot of people buy it from craft stores. And there's like a number you can call, which I should maybe just post, you know, where it's like Hobbytown or something, where it's a supplier that ships Sculpey out all over the world. And I just buy it in bulk. And it's just, you don't know what you're getting off a store shelf sometimes. You don't know how long that stuff's been sitting there. You know, I had a girl, you know, when I called to get some of this stuff, I said, give me some really new Sculpey because I got to sculpt something big and I can't be. She goes, the Sculpey stays new forever. And I said, honey, how old are you? And she says, well, I'm 27. I said, I've been using your product longer than you've been alive. And I know that that's not true. And I said, please don't send me old Sculpey, send me new Sculpey. And so I got a nice new thing of Sculpey.
Big Robin said the first thing my grandsons do when they come over is go straight to your Guinball machine headed for a piece of gum.
Now that's what I call raising a kid right. Dad, can we go to the dead guy's head and get some gum?
Zachary Reel says, will you be returning to Mask Fest?
Yeah, I hope to. Yes. Yeah. I mean, Eric needs to kind of get his, you know, and get his location together so we know where we're going. And then I will definitely, you know, I will know more by then, but.
Oscar Young says, do pasta makers create the same softness?
I wouldn't know. I haven't used a pasta maker. It's a worthwhile experiment. If you got one, try it out. That's the key to everything. Trying it out. You know, my whole life has been nothing but experimentation because I'm attention deficit learning disorder kind of guy, and I couldn't follow directions to save my life. So I've always just been experimenting, and that's how I've got to doing this now, is experimentation. When I was starting this whole thing back when I was a kid, there was no YouTubes or any of that. It was really, so it forced me to sort of learn by doing and making lots of mistakes and making expensive ones sometimes, but it was worth it, you know. So
Chanel Pinpin says, more than 27 years of using Sculpey, you must look way younger than you truly are.
That devil upstairs, I did sign that contract. Yeah. So, okay, this, like I said, when I started this off, I was just telling the folks that were tuned in early that what I did was I went ahead and did an armature. You can see my armatures are pretty rudimentary in that when I'm just doing a bust for a larger sculpture, which is what this is going to be, I just start screwing wood together. I saw it up on the bandsaw and I just start, you know, just screwing it together to get what I need and above all make it strong. And so there was like a dowel rod that I screwed or drilled up inside that foam head that I showed you. After I got a foam head. And the reason I like using foam heads is because when you run into something that's bone and you've got a regular skull armature, you're sort of screwed. There's now plastic or whatever there. And the reason I like foam is because I can carve away foam and get it out of the way so that, you know, you don't have to, if you need to get in and lose some of that, and I just did that on purpose just to show you guys. I didn't really need to. But it's foam, you know, it's 3-pound foam. So you can carve away foam and you can push clay back onto it. And what I do is once I get that armature where I want it and carved out on the band or the belt sander, I shape it down, make it smaller, bigger, take the jaw down, things like that. And once I get that done, I will put a coat of Elmer's glue over the whole thing and then get a handful of sawdust out from under my bandsaw and just sort of blow the sawdust over the surface of that wet Elmer's glue, white Elmer's glue, and I just let it dry. And then, Mark Newman. Hey, Mark.
Mark's, and he says, I wonder why you use Super Sculpey for this larger scale.
A lot of guys use things like wet clay. Mike Hill is like a master with wet clay. I know a lot of people are. A lot of guys like. I grew up on Sculpey. It's a thing that I'm used to, and what I was, talking about here with the foam armature, I use a lot of tin foil too sometimes when I have to take up. So I know what I want, and I know how much bulk I'm going to need, and I tend to not use as much Sculpey as you might imagine. And the reason for that is because doing the armature, Andy Burkholz, hey buddy, when I'm doing the armature, I sculpted in the armature foam wise more than so you get mostly foam and less Sculpey. And so if I really know what I want, let's take this monkey for instance. This monkey was sculpted. There's not a lot of Sculpey there. There's actually, in the case of this monkey, I filled a milk carton, a square cardboard milk carton full of foam. And then there's a dowel rod screwed in here. There's a dowel rod screwed in here. This is a foam skull that I used. I had a mold similar to the one I just showed you of the life-size skull of a baby skull. And I filled that full of foam and I carved it into a monkey. And then this is small. I filled toilet paper tubes or paper towel tubes full of foam. And I just carved them all down on my bandsaw. And then I pinned them together with bamboo shrimp on the Barbie style skewers. And I skewer the foam together. And I just put a little foam in between there and glue everything. And then over that, I put Elmer's glue and then blow the sawdust on. And the whole reason for the sawdust is on the glue is when it dries, it makes a really nice tooth that the Sculpey, you can push the Sculpey on. And that Sculpey sticks on there beautifully, and then you can start working. And so again, I did this through years of experimenting with things and found that this works best for me, And so...
Paul Holster said, absolute mastery, what inspired you and what inspires you now?
What inspires me now? The short answer is you guys. I love looking at I was looking at Mark Newman's work today, and I just think that guy is like, wow, there's like, I heard Jordu talking, about some of the people that inspired him and saying that he was humbled by them, and I feel the same way. I don't think I'm any great shakes compared to most of the sculptors that are watching right now. I gotta tell you the truth, and like Jordu said, this isn't false modesty or whatever it was. He had a better term for it. It's genuine awe of the talent, So in my case, I just what part of the thing was when I was a kid, I sucked at everything except this. And so that's really kind of the short story of how it happened. Was I was a terrible student. I was I grew up in a really dysfunctional home, and so there was a lot of but where I got my mother taught ceramics in our basement, and there was always clay, So
Linda Ehrenfried said, do you bake this with the foam?
I use a heat gun, and this when I sculpt with Sculpey, the Sculpey part, unlike what you're doing, Linda, because I know in the end product that Sculpey is a part of your end product. In my case, it's not. My case, it's a means to an end. In my case, what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to get this as far as I can take it as a sculpt, and then when I really am happy with it, down to the tiniest wrinkle, the tiniest crevice of the sculpt, and it looks exactly what I want it to be.
There's some confusion for people about what you did. Like Kurt Strubeck says, wait, what does the Elmer's do?
Okay, let me finish Linda's question.
Sorry.
Okay, I'm going to be heating just the surface of this, and one of the reasons I like using Sculpey is because I tend to be real heavy-handed when I put parting lines on, and if it's a clay that's in any way soft, my big sausage fingers are going to push into it. So I like to harden it, the surface of it up first, and that way I'm ensured that that parting line is not going to damage what I've worked so hard to get for wrinkles and skin texture and stuff. So that's one of the reasons I like to use Sculpey, is skin texture. So,
Mark Newman said, "You're awesome, Tom. Now get to work."
Okay, yes, all right, I'm going to get to work. All right, so one of the reasons that I selected this woman is because I was just kind of looking on Pinterest, and for ages I've been wanting to do what I call, the next piece I'm going to be doing is of the life-size pieces is the widow, and I want to make this creepy widow, and I thought that face really. But more than that, I kind of want to make her, otherworldly and give her a gothic feel. Going to have a mourning dress, and she's going to be basically half human, half spider. It's going to have multiple limbs, 4 legs and 4 arms and stuff. So I thought that this picture addressed it really well. So I'm starting with the nose, just to kind of get a feel of.
Steve Gibson said, "What about open jaw? Same foam, just cut to expose the teeth?"
Exactly. Yes. Exactly. There's a one of the things that I suggest with foam is that you get just get a kit of it and play with it. You have to mix it with a Jiffy mixer, you get those at Walmart or any paint store. I've sometimes just mixed it with a stick, but you get a better mix with a Jiffy mixer. So.
Sandra Lira said, "Tom, how do you know when the Sculpey is baked enough with the heat gun?"
I just touch it with my fingers.
Okay, she said it doesn't crack if the inside is soft.
It does, but in my case it does. You let it cool naturally. You don't try to cool it down after it's done. I'm just baking the surface enough that when I push against it, it won't. A lot of sculptors don't use this for the purposes that I'm using it for. They don't use it to make big life-size molds. It's not as practical for a lot of sculptors. A lot of guys use. I'm hearing a lot of great things about monster clay, which and a lot of guys are, and I grew up on this, so I got used to it and stuff. And I like the monster clay. I already gave me some monster clay to do some things for demos, and it worked much faster because I had a limited amount of time. So I gave, when I was just sort of demonstrating anatomy and stuff, and it worked great. But I've seen incredible results from other artists, So most of you guys have your favorite mediums clay-wise. And I just suggest you stick with them, And if it's Sculpey, that's great. So.
Charlotte Ann Webb wants to know, she needs your supplier for bulk Sculpey.
Okay. What I'll do is, Charlotte, if you private message me, I will give you the phone number of that. Just PM that later on.
You just don't know it offhand?
I don't know it offhand. Yeah, it's in our Rolodex.
Yeah.
I just call this number like once every year because I buy it enough to last me a year. And, you know, UPS man knocks on the door. And
Jeannot Pinpin says, you only use pictures of actual people, or do you sometimes use other sculptors' work as references?
I don't really use other sculptors' work as reference, although I'm very inspired by other sculptors. But I don't use their work as reference because what I do is I really want to stay extremely original to my idea. So, and my whole goal is to replicate life and make it seem real. So I try to get photographs of what it is I'm doing, and then, you know, whether I find them online or take them myself.
Shel Simpson says, are those taxidermy eyes?
These are eyes from Seacrest Toy. I use all kinds of different eyes. These just happen to be, they're one of those reborn. Some of you may be familiar with them, some of you watching. They make them in all different sizes. These are 26 millimeter. You can get them from how do you spell that?
I think it's SECRIST.
Just look up Seacrest dolls or just Google it, and then they've got a thing where they do those reborn kits, you know, where they're vinyl dolls that look like they're right out of the womb, and you know you could, and I ordered them a while back, and they're supposed to be color fast and everything, but I'm looking for better eyes now. I'm learning to make my own, but it's a drag. It really is. I have a great deal of respect for guys who pull off their own eyes and make them look good.
Jordu said he has to run, but he said before he goes he wants to mention to you that there's a revolutionary clay coming soon from Monster Makers. Unbelievable stuff.
Oh, good. Yes. I talked with Arnie about that, in fact. So he was telling me about they're kind of going to compete with the Sculpey a little bit, and I'm anxious to try it out. I can't wait.
Sheila Rand says, do you have a dream project, something you'd love to be able to do if time and money weren't issues?
I'm kind of working on, you know, the dream projects come in small increments. I just sort of do them. I mean, I do really, I cannot believe I'm at that stage in life where I'm going to just kind of do what I want. But I'm kind of doing what I want now. One of the things that I've talked about for a long time is I'd like to do a giant. I mean, a really kind of like a 12-foot guy just standing there looking down at you like you're lunch. And I'm not sure exactly. I've been looking at photo reference and stuff to get just the right face, because I use elements of character from faces, you know. You can kind of see, if you look, there's books scattered all over the table of, you know, what if we need neck reference or something. I've got all these books all over the table. I have tons of reference. And
Brian Larson says, for smiling characters, do you attach teeth to the sculpture?
Yeah, I'll rough in the teeth. And then when I'm ready to make the mold, I'll dig the teeth out. Just dig them out.
We gotta plug that. Plug it.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. All right, we're running low, so I'm gonna.
Lots of people are sharing the link to Seacrest Eyes for people, so we don't have to worry about.
Oh, good.
Andy Bergholtz is very sweet. He says, my longtime favorite sculptor, absolute masterclass, awesome work, and invaluable info coming here. You rock, Tom.
Man, you guys are so cool. Look, there's an Andy Frankenstein right there. There's my Jordu back there. There's Andy's pirate. See, I got all that stuff. I love you guys. Okay. All right. Okay. So
Jim Groman said, I love how you still use straight flesh-colored Sculpey and still don't mix it with anything.
Yeah. Well, again, it's my means to an end. It's not my end. So it's going to be silicone in the end. Oh, did I mess up my picture here? Everybody can see? Okay. All right.
I'm on delay a little bit, but
Okay.
so. There you go. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So one of the things I mentioned that this is going to be a spider lady, and I just love this face I spotted, and that was sort of what made me decide to do this particular face today. Oop, that's a little too low. All right, I need to put on my dollar store glasses now because I can see.
Marissa Lynn said, how long on average does it take a creation to come to fruition?
That is a crazy, as simple as that question is, it's a really difficult one to answer because the answer is always different. I have spent 3 weeks on full-size pieces, and I have spent 6 months on full-size pieces. And generally in between there, you know, it's because one of the things about my work is that, you know, some guys, you know, they hire out to do hair work and all of that, make clothing, all that stuff. They hire all that stuff out. They do the sculpting, and maybe they make the mold, maybe they don't. There's a lot of different, and I would do that if I could, but I cannot find anybody around here that does the work like in California where there's a lot of people that have those skills. I would do that if I could, but I don't have that luxury. So I do it all myself. I do everything. I poke every hair. I put in every eyelash. I paint and tint all my silicone. I make my, I do all that stuff. So.
Steve Gibson said, can you finish your thought on the exposed teeth?
Oh, yes. I will sculpt the teeth in, and then I will dig them out when I'm ready to make the mold. And then what I do is I have a supply of a lot of dental teeth. I got, dentures and stuff, tons of them. And I make them, I've got a mold that I have of teeth and gums, and I will Dremel and do a lot of dental work in order to get what I want that fits what I had sculpted in there. And I will get inside the silicone mouth and press in a little epoxy sculpt and make a plate that fits, and then I'll build the teeth on that plate, And again, everything is a little different. I mean, this really is an art form where if you don't know how to do it, you kind of make it up as you go along, I used to have a printmaking professor that could be a real asshole about process. And he was really a stickler about learning all these processes for intaglio printing and acid etch printing and all these and people kind of got on him about it. And he goes, listen, people, and he taught me a lot. Noel Rifle, he's still out there somewhere. I looked him up a while back. And he said, if you are taking on an art form and you've got to stop and think about every bit of instruction over and over again, it limits your ability to create to such a degree that it's like having to learn to read all over again before you pick up a book, So through the years, I've learned woodworking, and I've learned fiber arts, and I've learned epoxies and silicones and all that stuff, so that when I have a picture in my head, I don't have to go, oh God, now I got to learn. It's already a known. And one of the best ways today to do that is Smooth On has like 10,000 YouTubes of all of their products. And I wish I'd have had YouTube growing up, because, man, there's a lot of good stuff on there.
Well, there's an interesting question. I can't make out the name. It's another language, but said, how did you become what you are now?
I think I'm still becoming. How did I become what I am now?
That could mean all kinds of things.
I mean, yeah, I'm 58 years old, and you know, it really started when I sculpted a couple of things out of clay when I was in kindergarten, and they were sort of heads or tails above the other classmates, which if I looked at them now, they probably still look awful. And this high school art teacher, I think his name was Mr. Armstrong, sort of poked his head in when I was in kindergarten. We're all sitting in this circle, and he called my teacher out. And the next thing I know, they're calling me out in the hall, and I thought, I'm in trouble again, because I was always in trouble. And he said, I think you're a very talented young man, and I think that you should, you know, keep doing this kind of thing because it really is impressive. And said, I don't remember exactly what he said because I was, you know, 6, but it left a big mark on me. And as I said, I got terrible grades in school except for art, and so that was kind of the beginning of it. You know, it was,
Kendall Hart said, I left my day job after seeing your art back in 2011. You, sir, rule.
Oh, God, thank you, Kendall. And I am familiar with your work, and I love that you're working on such a large scale and doing such a phenomenal job with it. If any of you have not seen Kendall's work, take a look at his page. He has kind of created a world of his own, and I'm sure, like, you know, you could do your own theme park. It's really phenomenal stuff. I love it.
Chris Jackson said that they'd love to make a trip out here to capture you and your studio and 360 Pano for viewing in VR or on the web for IX.
Man, that might be possible. Yeah.
We'll have to be in touch, Chris.
Yeah, we'll talk to you. We'll talk to you at AluxCon, if not before.
Well, he was talking about having that for us.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. See,
We'll
Airhead.
Yeah. Jeannot Pinpin said, when you're sculpting a creepy character, is it like they're weird and you're distancing yourself from them, or is there some sort of sympathy despite their monstrous features?
You know, I thought Guillermo said it best. He said that monsters are his patron saints, and they are mine as well. When he you know, I attended his, when, you know, the opening when he did his the thing at which one was that? That was at when we went to Toronto. My work was in the At Home with Monsters tour that he had, and I had a bunch of pieces there, and he gave a wonderful speech about that very thing. And what he said was that monsters, because he felt like an outcast, and I did as a kid. I was just a weird kid, you know, and I felt like an outcast, and he felt like, and when he saw monsters on the screen, he was like, these are my friends, you know. And the reason they're his friends is because they were outcast, and they became, as he said, his patron saints, and I thought that was brilliant. I'd never heard that before, and I related it to it so well. And so I really look at these as not monsters are ugly, because I don't really think freaks are ugly. I just think they're different, and I like different. And yes, there is definitely a creepy flair to what I do, as with a lot of you guys out there like the creepy flair stuff. And I don't know why I like it so much, other than it goes back all the way to almost pre-memory with me, where Halloween was the favorite time of year, and you know, Herman Munster was on the small screen, and Frankenstein and Godzilla were on the big screen, and that's where I got all the joy that I get, you know, as a kid, and I just kind of carried that with me.
Randy Hand says, are you self-taught, Tom? And hello from Colorado.
Hey, Randy!
Both of us. Hi, Randy.
In college, believe it or not, my major, I graduated with a degree in fine art, but my major
was metalsmithing. And it wasn't metalsmithing because I had a keen interest in metals. It was metalsmithing because I took this class as an elective, and there was this professor who became my advisor, Bruce Metcalf. And Bruce was a really cool guy. He was really strict about, he was another one of those guys that could be a real asshole about discipline, about putting your tools back and stuff, which I obviously didn't absorb that from him. But he was a stickler about learning process and learning stuff so that you knew it cold, you know, that you know, hey, how do I do a centrifugal cast? You don't know, and you're a third-year student, you know. He would say, Tom, it's your turn to order the metal. And I go, I don't know how to order the metal. And he would just look at me, you know, like, are you fucking kidding me? You don't know, you know? And basically what he was saying was, you don't know how? Learn. Teach yourself. And that was some of the things that he drummed into me. So he would say things like, if you want to learn plastics, we'll learn it together. You know, as long as you do the metalsmithing assignments I give you, if you want to incorporate other elements, other mediums in, we'll learn that in here. And so there was a freedom for me to learn everything that I could use to later on down the road tell any story I wanted to tell, you know. So, and how to get my hands on it. And if it wasn't invented yet, we're going to invent it if we can, you know. So that was a big influence on me. So I graduated with a metalsmithing degree. And I've probably made one piece of jewelry in my entire life. But what I was making was little pieces of armor and belt buckles and little vignettes in steel with plastic and clear cast and stuff like that involved, and just things like that.
Peter Tyndall said, did you sculpt the entire Medusa from Sculpey? Which I don't know if he's referring to the bust or the
then, well, the entire Medusa from the chest or from the waist up was made of Sculpey, yes. I did basically what I did was I got a budget Bucky skeleton, and I foamed in the inside portion of the ribs, and tinfoiled out some things and foamed in some things and made an armature using that skeleton because I wanted her to be really, really skeletal. And I supported it. I do a lot of welding too, which I didn't really show you out there. I've got a wire welder, and I do some steel welding. And so I built an armature that would hold that skeleton into position. And then I did the forearms to the hands in another mold and made it so they fit in, and then I silicone welded them all together. All right, I said this was going to be weird.
Somebody said you're still a weird kid. Yep.
Yeah, I'm still a weird kid.
Mitchell McKeon says, can you knock down your tool marks in the Sculpey with a solvent like using naphtha with Monster Clay?
That's a good question, because a lot of people use solvents and I do not. I wanted to give her 4 eyes because she's a spider. So I just kind of put that on there to surprise everybody. I do not use solvents. I know a lot of people like solvents with Sculpey. I don't like them because every time I've ever seen them used, it always looks like somebody used solvent on that area. And I like to get what I get with my hands and my tools. If I get far enough, and I'll just maybe demonstrate a few things if I don't, because this does take a long time to get it to a point where I'm using things like I have texture stamps. You know, these are some texture stamps here. This was made off of an orange. This is an avocado, and these are made off of some of those primate death mask up there. I took some skin samples off that. I've got tons of texture stamps. I don't use them as often as you might think, but when you do have them, they're really handy. But one of the things that I do is I just use my fingers, and I use them down to you know, one of the things that you'll notice is that I haven't even picked up a tool yet, hardly at all. Because what's really important, there's a lot of people that just sort of start out learning to sculpt, and they really want to get to the details quick. And you should never try to get to your details before you really have the basic bone structure, muscle structure, and your basic anatomy locked in. You know, you shouldn't even worry about details until then. And I was like everybody else. I really wanted to get to the nitty gritty wrinkles around the eyes and stuff like that. I just couldn't wait to do it. And it's really important. I had a professor, or a drawing. I paid to take classes in his home. He wasn't a professor. He was just a really good portrait artist. His name was Bill Kufal. And Bill what he would do is he would set a model out there, and he would say, I want you all to cross your eyes just a little bit so the model looks blurry in your eyesight. And what you're seeing is blocks. You know, you're seeing this triangle and another, you know, you're seeing these blocks, these shapes of blocks that you're going to be putting together. And worry about that first, you know. And when you're drawing, whether you're drawing it or whether you're sculpting it, worry about getting the blocks right before you start worrying about putting in forehead wrinkles and smile lines and stuff. So that's what I'm doing.
Several people are commenting that they like that you use your hands a lot before getting to the tools. And Jared said that Jordu kind of said the same thing. That you should use your hands as long as possible.
Yeah.
Now, another person saying when you're doing smaller scale, you kind of have to use the tools even
correct.
for the blocking in.
Yes, yeah, you do. Yeah, but it's funny because I use this spatula here. If you can see that, what that is, I made a lot of my tools. I made this spatula from a flat spatula, which I hammered to a little ski, you know, that front little ski slope in the front of that thing, and you can lay, you know, you can lay stuff in. So I'm going to bake, like I can't get my sausage fingers in there. So what I'm going to do is just. I just press stuff into the hollows of it. It's because if you look at her eyes, you guys probably can't see that far, but she's got these hollows up under her eyelids. So stuff like that. I have all these bigger tools that are used in place of hands when my big fingers can't get in there. That's a burnisher from leftover from Noel Rifle's class printmaking, and that's something that I use a lot. A lot of the tools that I use were not made for sculpting. I just made them for sculpting. Of course I'm missing my favorite tool. I'm always missing it. There it is. This came out of a nail file kit. It was an antique thing I found in something my great-grandmother had. And we had some stuff, and I hammered it to be like, this is what a Woodson tool, a dental tool, but I like this little spoon on the end there because I use that more than anything. I get in here and do this kind of stuff where I'm pitting out, you know, there's hollows around here in the tear duct area. So I do that kind of thing. I'm pushing stuff around to sort of sculpt out that orbital, that eye that's in the bone. And this particular lady, she has these really deep sockets, which is one of the things I loved about her. So.
Mitchell McKeon said that tool looks like a wax spatula.
Yeah, I've seen wax spatulas, and yeah, it's one that I made myself, but yeah, sure, wax spatula. It does look like a wax spatula. I came out of the toy industry, and there were a lot of wax sculptors in the toy industry, and I was hired on as a concept guy. And there was a guy in the shop named Elmer Cook. He was a World War II veteran, and he'd been with American Greetings when American Greetings was very young, all the way on up to, you know, when I started working with him. And he taught me all this stuff with the you know, making molds and that, you know, more so than I learned in school. He sort of took it from there, and then, you know, see now, one of the things I run into is sometimes I have to take the eyes out and pop them back in because I don't like where they're looking. I'm going to get her looking in the place she's looking in the photo. Come on. There we go.
Brian Larson says, do you use a clay rake to create the skin texture?
Sometimes. What I use clay rakes for is when I have to make a round surface really round and get all of those finger pushes that you see in clay, this stuff. And what I'll do, and I don't think I'm going to have time to get to that place, because it's going to, you know, a good face sculpt takes me a couple of days. So I will take this as far as I can for you guys and answer as many questions. And I will go as long as I can. But a good face sculpt takes a couple of days to get it to, you know, where I'm happy enough that I want to. Because once you make a mold of it, that's forever, you know, so you got to be happy with what you got. Can't really change it.
There's a couple things about toy design. Oscar Young said, how did you get into the toy industry? And then Jared had mentioned, he said, I'm an 80s kid. Didn't James Groman and you sculpt that?
Yes, yes. Jim and I are old friends from way back, and we kind of grew up together in the toy industry, and he stayed in there, and he's kicking ass and taking names now. If any of you haven't seen Jim's work lately with
Groman.
Yeah, Jim Groman. Please check it out. It's awesome. If I was a kid and Groman was designing toys back then, I might be a whole different guy today. Because I used to have to break my toys and make them into what I wanted. And so Jim was the guy that made what I was seeking out as a child and never could get because toys were so tame.
Let's see. Cassidy Allison said, I love to use my hands, but it's very hard to keep the clay clean for a final piece. I end up throwing them away. Are you going to mold this sculpture? I'm excited to see what happens with this process.
Yeah, I'm going to mold it. You're not going to see everything that happens today, obviously, because it takes a long time. But eventually, yes, I will make a mold of this, and she probably wasn't around for the first part of this.
The final product will be silicone.
The final
skin.
product will be silicone, yes.
Raul said, I forgot what you told me about how you get a really desiccated skin look.
I did too. I forgot that too. Sure.
Like the deadness dust and stuff? I don't know.
In the silicone, I use powdered sugar, but that's in the silicone. I don't do that. I don't do that in the sculpting. I do that after it's pulled out of the mold and I'm painting it and it's got the last coat of paint on it and stuff.
Mark Holiom said, how concerned are you with symmetry? My stuff tends to look lopsided. The features, do you use a mirror or calipers?
No, I will literally take a photograph. And because symmetry is not something that happens in the human face very often. It looks similar, but it's not symmetric. And what I will do is I like when I was, last piece that I had to do that was an exact likeness was Al Capone. And I was cutting out pictures of Al and holding them up. And what I'll do is I will hold that right next to my sculpt and I'll cut it out. I'll literally take scissors, and this is just a person that I wanted certain wrinkles off her neck, you know. And I've got folders of this crap, of pictures that I just, instead of having to reprint everything, I go, oh, there's a neck. That's what I want. And I will, if I have a likeness I have to do, I'll have all this stuff laid out. Some of the pictures I'll have profiles cut out with scissors. and I will hold that profile right next to the thing, and so they match, you know. And I've been known to do stuff like that. And it's just sort of cheater ways to get it where you want it. So when likeness is a factor. Now, in this case, exact likeness is not as big of a factor because this is not a known character I'm sculpting. I'm using her as my reference, and then I'm kind of creating my own visage of this personality as a widow. You know, she's a black widow. She's wearing a mourning robe, and she's got all of this silky black stuff just dripping off of her. And she's probably going to be having a clutch purse in 2 of her 4 hands. And she's going to be having a bonnet, you know, a really creepy looking mourning bonnet and a cloak. And then maybe a silk red hourglass on the bustle of her dress behind her. And her dress is concealing 4 spidery legs instead of 2 normal ones. And the spidery legs are more like a spider's than they are a human's, where she's wearing those lace-up ridiculous boots that they used to wear in the Edwardian times or the Elizabethan times, but they're made for spider leg ends and not human feet. You know, I don't know. One of the things I love to do is just make this shit up as I go. That's what makes it so much fun for me. See?
Peter Tyndall said, do you end up using those same eyeballs in the finished silicone skin, or are they just placeholders for different eyes?
Oh, good question. These are what I call my stunt eyes. They're all scratched up and beat up from many times over, and then I've got a good clean pair that I use for the final project, for when I, you know, go to put it in. So
Brett Briley said, Tom, are you going to be coming to the Dallas area and do a class at Reynolds Smooth On anytime soon?
no. Sorry. I should get that out of the way right now. No, as much as I'd like to, traveling those distances at this juncture, maybe down the road ways, maybe, I don't know, but not anytime soon. No.
Rommel Pink.
Sorry.
Rommel Pink said, what do you use for molding?
I use a number of different things. Sometimes I use this stuff called, it all depends on what it is I'm trying to get. If I'm doing a face like this, I use this stuff called Shell Shock, and it's pretty cool. Or I will use another product called Epoxy Coat. I like them both equally, and sometimes I just mix it up just because. And everything that I mention that Smooth On carries, they have incredible array of YouTubes that you can watch, so you don't have to sit and watch me do it. You can look at how they use this stuff on their YouTubes. They really take care of artists, you know, so that you're not reading these bad stereo style instructions on how to use their product. You're actually seeing it, and they give you, you know, everything from how long to mix to, you know, how you place it on, and show you the supplies ahead of time. So
several people were commenting about you using confectioner's sugar and not talc when, you know, on the silicone when you're painting.
Mm-hmm.
They said not talc?
No, I used to use talc. There's a couple reasons why I don't. One is that sometimes if the paint isn't at the exact right stage for it to go, you know, stick to the surface, it encapsulates, and you get white crumblies that get encapsulated in silicone and stay white, and that sucks because you can't get it out, and you're sort of screwed. What I like about silicone, or what I like about confectionery sugar, is it's a really fine powder sugar, and I wait until the silicone is just at the tacky stage where it's not dry but it's not drippy wet anymore. After my last coat of paint, you know, I work my way through colors. In my last coat of paint, Then I put it in an old sock that has no holes in it, and I paff it on, and I just sort of gingerly brush it in, very, with a soft bristle brush. I brush it in the surface, and then I either heat it with a heat gun or I walk away from it and let the rest of the paint cure up the rest of the way till it's completely cured. And it's really important to be patient about that. Sometimes I've tried to heat it with a heat gun and I go after it too fast. And I'm always sorry that I did. Because it bakes like cotton candy on there, and you got to watch that. So lately I've just been letting things go, and then when it's all cured, you take it to a nice water faucet in the bathroom where or not a bathroom, but in a basement where you got a nice stationary tub and a big place to rinse it off, or hell, take it in the shower and rinse the sugar off. And what it does is that where that sugar made contact, it's a micro tiny surface that is flat and not glossy, and that's what you want with skin.
Peter Tyndall said, when filling your molds with silicone, do you have a core inside the mold and pour the silicone, or do you do a multi-layered brush in?
I make a core. I take, there used to be a company called Clean Clay, or I can't remember the name of the company, but they made this stuff called Clean Clay. And they went out of business, but Smooth On bought their formula. And it's a sulfur-free clay, and because platinum silicone is allergic to sulfur, so there's a sulfur-free clay that you get called Sculptex now. They called it Sculptex, but they bought the formula from this clay company that the Columbus Clay Company used to make it, and they went out of business. And
Jeff Gray said, any suggestions for casting thin, crystal clear pieces? What resin do you use, and any special considerations using it?
that would be a question for Smooth On more than me. I like, they make a product called Crystal Clear, but they make it in a whole variety of durometers where you kind of talk to one of their reps and say, here's what I want to do. This is another thing I love about these guys, and they'll recommend which crystal clear you should use. So you'll notice I'm kind of building these cheeks out a little bit now.
Mayor D'Alessio said, is she IX bound?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the plan.
Yeah.
Mitchell McCann said, but do you make a core? And I think I'm a little behind in the question, so you sort of already covered some of that with the core mold.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I'll tell you what. Why don't we do this? Why don't you run out and grab that mold and bring it in here of Al Capone, and I'll just show them the core. Just set the phone down and, yeah. Okay.
Want this to go.
All right. Now, oh, look at that. There's a stink bug in there. There is. These things are a real issue in Ohio. See the stink bug in the corner of the mold? Anyway, you can see, I've painted, like, just imagine that's all finished and everything. And I've painted my epoxy coat. Epoxy coat comes in this maroon color, and it comes in gray. I like the maroon because I can see definitely where I got it. And I know where I got it, and I know where I don't. And then what I do is, when it's all painted on, I put plasti paste over that. And this gives it its super rigid. You can dig a screwdriver in and pop the mold apart, and it's not going to break or crack or anything. So you got your front and your back half made. And then what I'll do is, when I have this hard shell, I will roll out that clean clay with a roller that you use to make pizza dough, or cookies or whatever. I'll roll that out so that it's anywhere from a 1/16 to a 1/4 inch thick, and I'll press that into this mold. And then I will make it so that the undercuts, like the hollows in the ears are covered so that when you pull this thing back out, see, here's the core, okay? You see the core? You guys see that? See how that core sets in there? Now, what I'll do is I put steel bars across, I'll Dremel out a thing and I'll take a piece of steel and I'll lay it across there and I'll lay another one across the neck. And that way it registers right there. So that core is right where it is. You can see the silicone thickness is going to be what it is. And then that way you can pull the mold apart after you get the silicone. And you can see the hollows left in the core, and that's for the eyes and everything. And then, so you get the general idea.
Wanted to have you address something because Chris Jackson was asking about costuming for the characters, and Marissa Lynn was saying, you mentioned earlier that you do the entire process from start to finish independently. However, you should note that you do use, for really complicated things, you do use the seamstress.
Yeah,
You do
like,
the majority of the clothing yourself.
I do the majority, but like in cases of, I did H.P. Lovecraft and Edgar Allan Poe for Guillermo, and for those I wanted a professional seamstress, so I had a professional seamstress definitely help me out there. Boy, this looks like hell right now.
Yeah, we better sculpt more.
Yeah. So.
Let's see here. Steve Gibson said, are the finished eyes from the same doll supply company or glass or something better? Or
No, in this case they're going to be from the same supply company. If I don't make my own, I'm really considering making my own eyes. Sometimes I use, like in the case of the devil, I use glass eyes from a taxidermy supply house, and that's what I did with him, because they made them in the same size. They had 36 millimeter eyes, or 26 millimeter eyes rather, and that's right about human, 26, 28, and these eyes happen to be 26 millimeter, and so I ordered them because the pupils were a little larger and they were animal-like, and I would really prefer glass eyes because they just have that nice permanent shine.
Brian Larson said, do you use a clay rake for texture?
No. I could demonstrate texture a little bit later here, but
Okay.
some of you guys are familiar with using saran wrap. Oftentimes I will use saran wrap to create and then draw into the saran wrap. There's 1,000 different.
Mitchell McKeon said, what about using matte Novox? I'm not sure what that's in relation to.
Oh, I use that stuff. In fact, I was the guy they experimented with it, and I have experimented with it, and it worked initially, and then I noticed on some of the stuff that I used it on, I could rub the paint back off with my fingers, and that wasn't cool, because it was going to places where I couldn't fix it. So it was back to the drawing board, and I let them know that, and they were like, well, okay, we're going to keep working on it. And it might have just been because I might not have used it exactly right. It's, some of this stuff is such a black art sometimes.
Mitchell said, do you ever use freeform air instead of Plastipaste?
Yes, I love freeform air. That devil that I showed you at the beginning of the thing, his entire legs are made, the understructure of that is made of freeform air. And I use freeform air for a lot of different things because it's really lightweight, it works really easy, and the best thing about it is they've got a new product out that's like freeform air, but it's a lot stronger yet, and it works good even making in lieu of Plastipaste. using freeform air in the backs of molds for support if you use this new stuff. And I can't remember what the name of the new stuff is. I got some downstairs. They gave me some to try out, and I loved it.
Jim Groman says he uses the saran wrap technique to this day, one of the many things he learned from you.
Yeah. We did a lot of sculpting together.
Let's see here. I missed some of these. Sandra Lira said, would you consider doing another video on painting silicone?
I would, but you know, there are better YouTubes on the Smooth On website that you would probably get more out of than what you could get from me. They would, you know, that they would be a little bit probably more accurate than what I could give you, and they'd be able to break it down, because you could probably tell already that as an instructor, I'm kind of a scatterbrain. And I'm all over the place, especially with, you know, I enjoy the questions, but I'm trying to answer 6 different ones at the same time, and that's great, but questions are what I use to drive my thing, and there wouldn't be any questions there.
Peter Tyndall asked if you would be coming to Monster Palooza.
No, I get that question a lot, and if I was to come to Monster Palooza, I would want to bring work, and I live in Ohio, so when it was, you know, I was at the very first one before, when Monster, it was Maskapalooza. What was it? Was it Maskapalooza?
Maskapalooza.
Yeah, when
in Cherry Hill, New Jersey.
Yeah, and then that was sort of Elliot was trying it out there, and it worked really great. But he was like, you know what? I'm going to go where the action is, go to where all these effects guys live, and and I don't blame him. I would have done the same thing, and so he did, and so the two split off, and there was Mask Fest on one side and Monster Palooza on the other. And see,
I think it's a question of logistics.
Yeah, shipping my work out for a weekend would destroy any profit I would ever make selling anything. And I would love to come out and just meet everybody and shake hands and stuff, but it always tends to fall at a time of year when I've got 6 other things going on, and I just love the idea of it, but I just can't seem to make it happen every year that it comes about. So
Angela Coleman Pinson said, do you do any workshops in Ohio?
None yet. Maybe one of these days, yeah. I just don't know where I would do it.
Sometimes you display work, but not, I haven't done classes in Ohio.
I don't really do too many classes. I mean, I've just done stuff with Smooth On, and I've done some small stuff, but like really small, like this, you know, hour, 2 hour long, you know, class presentation kind of stuff. But boy, that eye just doesn't want to. I'm pulling that out again. See, this is what I go through. I am not a graceful sculptor like a lot of you guys. I really am not.
Graceful?
No, not graceful. A lot of times, this eye business tends to really...
Jared said shipping sculpture sucks. I guess we know what that's
Oh
about.
yeah, yeah. It's funny, I was just telling that story today when they lost the Shiflett brothers' work when we went out to... when they came to AluxCon. I hope you guys will reconsider coming back to AluxCon, because it broke our hearts when we didn't get to see your work out there, and when you guys had to leave early over that. I really would love to have you guys come back to that thing, because just your presence there is a treat. It really is. You're loved.
Tina Parsons said, Tom, you're so vivid with what you sculpt. You are so vivid with what your sculpt will look like. Do you sketch it out, or is it all in your mind?
It's in my mind, and I collect photographs that'll help get me there when I'm sculpting. But I've got a picture in my mind, and I used to do a lot of drawings when I first started out with this, but I'm at that place now where I want to have fun, and a lot of having fun for me is being able to change right in the middle of the stream. You know, go, you know, I like this, but oh, look at this, this works better. And then it completely blows away anything I had drawn. And sometimes having a drawing hinders that because you get too biased to the drawing. And I don't recommend that for everybody. It just kind of happened that way for me.
Arnie Goldman said he'd be happy to host a class.
Oh yeah.
We'll see. We
Yeah.
get a lot on the schedule.
You can see kind of how clumsy I am right now. So every time I sort of get in a classroom situation, it always goes crappier sculpture-wise than it does when I'm just sitting here by myself. And maybe that's just nerves. I don't know if you guys can see what's going on here.
Yeah, if you need to turn it or something. Kevin Merck said having to make adjustments to a sculpt. He is human after all.
Yeah, oh God, it's all adjustments. You know, and one of the funny things, you guys, is that, you know, this wonderful lady here that's helping me get through this, my wife, oftentimes will walk by when I'm struggling and she'll go, case in point, I was doing Harry Earls, the little midget guy from Freaks, and I was doing it for Guillermo. And she's like, your face isn't round enough. And I'm working on this thing for 2 days going, what is wrong with this? It doesn't look like him yet. And I had all this reference of him laid out in front of me. She goes, it's not round enough. It's not round enough. And I'm like, it's plenty round. If I get any rounder, it'll be a complete perfect circle. Any rounder, it's going to be a circle. And she looked at me and she said, yeah, it's a circle. And I looked at it, I was like, fuck, it is a circle. It's a circle. And, you know, she nailed it. And my artistic ego just was like, I'm the artist. I know what I'm doing. And she's like, it's a circle. And lo and behold, I made it. I cut a section out, jammed it up like this, and pushed it all together. And it was Harry Earls. And his face is a circle. It's a ball.
Steve Gibson said, will you be getting to ears in this session? I hate sculpting ears.
You know what, Steve? I'm going to sculpt an ear right now because that'll save my ass.
Let's do an ear.
It'll save your ass.
Yeah, because this is embarrassing. I'm trying to get this to look like her, and maybe it looks like it. Oh, I know what I need to do. Okay. One of the things that I learned from Bill Kufal and Jordu even watching him sculpt and sculpting with him once at a thing at a LuxCon was that when people tend to zero in too much on one part of the sculpt, it never truly gets done. And so you're working on all of the sculpt all of the time. What does that mean? It means that, you know, you're roughing stuff in and you're going here, and chin. You're not going, okay, ear, and then I'm going to do a real detail and get the ear exactly right and then move on to the nose. No, you rough all this stuff in. So that was a good reminder for me to rough stuff in.
Lauren Wolf says, do you think the eye pairs will look at the same thing in the finished product?
Yeah, they will. That's the, yeah.
A lot of people are commenting on how their wives are their best critics or all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Positive stuff.
Yeah. She has this ability. We'll be sitting watching some movie or something, and she'll go, oh, that's so-and-so, and we'll have this big argument about, and she recognizes faces of these people when they were little kids, you know, and I'll be, oh, that's not, and lo and behold, she's right, you know. Some obscure actor from 1991 that is just appearing in something just now, and she's like, that's that person, and nails it. And so I now trust that
I think Kelly Stanford tuned in late here. She said, I'm new to sculpting and I wonder what kind of clay is best, and after you're done, do you mold it? Or sorry, I just don't know what to do when done or when to start. The only thing I can make so far is claws from polymer clay and then bake it, so really new to the how and such.
I would start out in her case with wet clay, just to learn the form and function of sculpture, just to learn the basics of, because it's a fast medium and you really have to get your hands into something. And when I was a kid, what I would do was, my mother taught ceramics in the basement, and it was the kind that was slip mold stuff, where it was chess sets and soup tureens and Christmas decorations and stuff like that that was molded in plaster molds and that kind of thing. And if something would break before it was fired, I would take it and crush it up in a plastic bag and sprinkle some water in there, and 2 days later it would become clay. And that was a lot like wet clay, but it was not, because wet clay has glycerin in it, which makes it a better clay for a lot of reasons. It holds its form better, it doesn't dry out so fast, and it's really soft. And so I would start with that. That's what I started with, was just a soft clay when I was a kid. And because if you're struggling with having to push stuff onto an armature with harder clay, which is where you go later, you're never going to learn the basics of sculpture, and there's all different kinds of methods. I mean, Steve Wang was talking about the couple of different, there's subtractive sculptures, there's guys who add stuff on, there's guys who subtract, and then there's guys who are, sculptors that do both. And I'm one of those that do both. I'm pulling stuff on, pushing stuff on, and pulling stuff off. And that came with just years of just doing it.
Brian McGuire said, do you exclusively use Super Sculpey? If not, do you find it difficult to adjust techniques back and forth for each different
One of the other things that I like to use a lot is epoxy sculpt, Abe's epoxy sculpt. And all of my skulls that I have made, the Frank skulls and all the different skull heads, those were all, I have like a basic skull head that oftentimes I'll sculpt over, that's sort of an under thing. And I will sculpt over the surface of that, because it makes great bone surface textures. And it has different stages that do different things. You can do things in the beginnings of its curing process that you can't do at the end, and vice versa.
Okay, I have to share this. Brandon Shiflett said, hi Kara, hi Brandon. Tom, what should super great sculptors like me and you say when asked for advice by less talented artists like my brother Jared? Oh dear.
I wish I had a brother that shared that kind of stuff. Yeah. You guys are so lucky to have each other. You don't know, man. And we are lucky to have you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sophie Cartier said, what's your advice for incomplete or unfinished sculptures? What's your take on deadline-driven sculpts versus I'm doing it because I love this, be it a creature, a bust, whatever?
I cut my teeth in the toy industry, and then I moved on, and then I really cut my teeth in the animatronics industry. I sculpted for a company called Life Formations years ago, and that was all deadline driven. And it wasn't. It started out, it was fun, and then it just got crazy, and for a lot of reasons. But I won't get into anything specific. But I'm glad I did it, because it was like boot camp. There was things that had to be done, and I would just take them home and work on them all night. and stuff. And that is the key to this. It's like anything else. You know, it's not something where I can sit and go, oh, here's the correct way to do a sculpt. It isn't. It's practice until your fingers bleed. And that experience made me practice until my fingers bled. And I had to do it to the point where I couldn't see straight. And it had to be done by next Tuesday. And there were 2 of them, you know. And it had to be a likeness. And then it had to be approved. And so that was a great way to learn, albeit a stressful way to learn. And I eventually left because it was affecting my health and my nerves and all this other stuff. And so, but that's where I came from. And sometimes having that added stress is a good thing, if that makes sense.
Kurt Strubeck said, will you mold that standing up like that?
What I'm going to do is lay it down. After, I'm going to unscrew the screws here. There's all these wood screws in this thing. And I'm going to unscrew these screws. And I'm going to lay it down. And I'm going to build a clay fence around the ear, up around the head, around the other side of the ear. And then I'm going to paint on my mold material and let it cure. And then paint on the stuff that holds the shape. So I get this big bulk of stuff, probably plasti paste, and then let that cure. Flip it over, peel the clay off the other side that was making that fence to make that parting line, and do the same thing on the other side. So that's, you know, I wish I could show you that whole process, but that is another whole ball of wax. And there's a lot of places to learn this stuff now. There's a lot of online things that show you exactly how to make those molds. And my mold making process is different than somebody like, say, Mike Hill. You know, Mike, I think what he does is he lays this whole thing up with a rubber, you know, a silicone. And then he slices it up the back, peels it off, and has a mother mold, which works out wonderful. You know, so it's just kind of how you grew up and what you learned on.
Going back to Abe's epoxy sculpt you were talking about, Cindy DeGraw said, how does Abe's epoxy sculpt resist sticking to the underlying skull?
Well, I want it to stick to the underlying skull. That's what I like about it. It sticks. You have to wear gloves when you mix it up. But you know, I sculpt it over things like a plastic skull, for instance, that I make a mold of. I make a urethane skull, and then I sculpt over the top of that skull, for instance. And see, here's one of those instances where I need to cut away some armature.
Oh, Ray Villafane, you're sweet.
Hi, Ray.
He said, from character design to execution, you're an absolute genius at your craft. Your characters have so much depth. Thank you for letting us watch.
Oh man, that's a real honor to hear somebody like him say that, because I just love his work. It's got so much character. I mean, and he's another one of those guys where you watch him sculpt and it's like a dance. You're watching ballet with fingers. You know, it's really. This is kind of clumsy, and it's going to be clumsy until it gets to where it's not clumsy anymore, and that's basically the bottom line. The way I sculpt is clumsy. One of the things that I just do is I just insist that it looks the way I want it to look, and I keep pushing at this stuff till all hours of the night, ask my wife, and then I get up again the next day and I keep at it till I get what I want. And sometimes what that entails sometimes is, so you notice I just roughed in that ear there. What that entails sometimes is literally tearing a half of it apart after you get it 90% there because it just isn't looking right, and starting that part over again because you've made some discovery about where you went wrong.
Mitchell McKeon said, do you use metal shim? I'm not sure what that is. But
No, not from a parting line. I was taught that way when I was a student at Kent when I took sculpture class. And the way the guy did it, I thought, what the hell is he doing? This could be so much better. So I didn't agree with that. I wound up, and I learned from Elmer about making, Elmer Cook at the toy company, how to make molds using just clay. Just making parting lines using just clay, and it worked so much better. And some guys get really good results using shims, but I have not had much luck with that and haven't seen it firsthand.
Georgiou wants you to know he's back. Hi, Georgiou.
All right.
Steve Gibson said, when using butcher's wax for mold release, do you use a brush and do you worry about streaks, or do you thin it somehow?
I use Johnson's paste wax, and I brush it on, and I take a torch and I heat it up a little bit and let it kind of melt into the surface, and it becomes like Teflon in a Teflon pan. And then while it's hot, I brush it some more, and it really sinks into the Sculpey, and then I let it dry completely. But the one thing that is absolutely essential is that you have to get everything covered, because this mold material sticks to this Sculpey like nobody's business, and you will never ever get it unstuck. You will literally have to chisel it out, and I've had that happen, and it sucks because you're basically picking up a big mold and throwing it away after all that work. I've made a lot of expensive mistakes learning this stuff.
I was going to say you're going to turn that a little, so I don't know.
Can you see?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine. Mitchell McKeon says epoxy coat sticks to skin very well too.
Yeah. I'll go to Harbor Freight and I'll buy just boxes and boxes of rubber gloves, or not rubber, not latex, vinyl gloves, or that blue stuff, whatever that is. What's that?
Is it nitrile?
Nitrile gloves. Thank you, sweetie.
Marissa Lynn said she's looking lovely. I can really see her personality starting to come through. Looking like so much more than your materials. I'm drawn to how endearing many of your characters are.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. One of my greatest influences of all time is Norman Rockwell. And back when I was still with Life Formations, the guy that we were working with, this guy named Bob Rogers, who really kind of built the rest of that whole Lincoln Museum out in Springfield, Illinois, he gave me one of the greatest. He said, "You're a twisted Norman Rockwell." And that was like, to me, that was great, because one of the things that Norman Rockwell did was he would exaggerate the personalities of everyone that he painted. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to bring you the personality of Aunt May or somebody, and then put her in the form of a creepy spider lady, so.
Peter Tyndall had asked you, have you ever collaborated with any other sculptors on a project?
Well, in the animation company, yes, you had to. You had to collaborate. I mean, I've collaborated, many times. When I was working for somebody else. When I started working just for me, I'm one of those guys that life is short and I want to do what I want to do. And my father, he said it best, and I didn't want to admit it, he said that you're the kind of guy that really shouldn't have a boss. And I kind of, But he was right. I really just wanted to do my thing, and hated people telling me what to do, and didn't play that well with others. And when I was at the toy company, that kind of happened there, and I wound up more or less being fired because I didn't play well with others. I wanted it my way, even though designing toys is definitely a team effort. It's a committee decision. There's a bunch of artists in the room that are going, legs are too long and the nose is too big, and you're going, no, that's my nose and it's just the way I want it, and that doesn't work. So that's in my youth, that was. And so what I told myself when I got older was, there's some things I really want to do, and I have the luxury of being able to do them now, and just sort of telling stories out of my own brain that I want to tell, that are my specific piece. Everyone, I always heard from guys, you should go to Hollywood and you should go, work in Hollywood. And then I'd get to know a few of these guys in Hollywood, and and I think Jordy could tell you the same thing. And they're like, oh man, it will make you old because you're having to jump through hoops at the last minute that people want you to do, and things people want you to do after you've put 99% of the work in, and they want you to change it. And I lived a lot of that in the animation business, and I just thought, I'm getting too old for this. If I have a choice, I don't want to do it. So that's kind of where I'm at now.
Speaking of Jordu, Larry Ayers said, I noticed guys like you and Jordu use both hands at the same time. Did you learn that, or is it a gift? And just on a personal note, one of the greatest things I ever saw was you and Jordu doing that demo together at like the third DeluxeCon. You guys were like an amazing team comedy-wise, and the fact that you would look out into the audience, not even looking at what you're sculpting, and continue to sculpt.
Oh, well,
and
I was using wet clay, and that was like my first foray with wet clay. And the funny thing was, I was using Jordu as my model, and Jordu didn't realize it right away. But I had pictures that I had snapped of him the year before, and Jordu has a great face, and he made all kinds of faces for me, and so I started working with that, and the audience kind of caught on before he did that he was who I was sculpting. It was a fun time. That was one of the highlights of that whole LuxeCon experience for me, was working with him.
Ray Villafane said, are most of your characters created in Sculpey? I agree with the Twisted Rockwell, and perfect balance between whimsy and freaky.
Yeah, most of my stuff, I say living, most of my living things, because I do a lot of dead stuff, dried bone and stuff, is starts out as a Sculpey sculpture.
Jeannot Pinpin said, are you still as excited about sculpting as when you learned it and experienced things for the first time?
More so. And the reason I am more so is because the more you learn, the more colors are on your palette, the more, and I go back to that thing about my teachers being such pricks about learning the materials, learn how to use the materials, and before you know it, you're doing them in your sleep. And the more you know how to use all of this stuff, that's it, the silicones and the paint systems and the this and the that, and watch all these YouTubes and then practice it with your own hands and get it to where you know it cold, and you can mix up stuff, where 50 and 50%, mix it together, and you don't have to think about it so much because you know what you want. And that makes it more exciting because you can get more ambitious. And the more ambitious you get, the more you're able to accomplish with a lot of different mediums in the same piece.
Dan Dynamic Menace said, Tom, what's your favorite piece you have sculpted over the years? The one you enjoyed sculpting the best out of all of them?
That's a hard question to answer. It's funny because I was just asked that same question the other day by somebody, and I think one of my favorites was doing Cletus and Shorty because it was done at a time when I had left Life Formations, and I was sort of feeling really sick about just doing this stuff. I mean, just kind of feeling like I was worn out. And my good friend Jim Rule said, Tom, you need to get back on the horse again, because I was really bummed out. And he said, you need to get back on the horse again and just pick a character that you really would love to do and just run with it, you know? And so he was, I think, that character. There was two characters that I really enjoyed. One was, what was it? The Deadeye guy. Gunslinger. What's his, Carcass Pete.
Yeah.
Carcass Pete. He was one, because Kara and I went on vacation, and everywhere we stopped was some antique store that had an element to Carcass Pete. From replica 6-shooters to old leather boots to an old leather hat to all the ingredients. And so I found this character on our vacation in forms of antique store finds. And we were just stopping at antique stores all the way up to Sleeping Bear Dunes, and I was walking out with all the ingredients. And when I went home, I just made this dead gunslinger that you get in a gunfight with him and you're going to lose because he's already dead. You could shoot him till the cows come home and he would kill you because you can't kill him. And so, see, that's where I go in my brain when I do this stuff.
Brian McGuire said, do you just gravity pour the silicone into the mold, or do you inject it?
I gravity pour. And I'm very careful about venting things if I need to vent them. I make sure that if there's going to be an air pocket, it has a place to escape. Sometimes I actually get a tiny drill bit and I drill. If I notice there's going to be a problem, I'll drill a little hole in the mold. And when I see silicone oozing out, I'll plug it with clay. And I'll know that I got it. There's a number of my sculpts that have that in their mold system.
Steve Gibson said, you mentioned earlier about sometimes being heavy-handed with parting lines, but you also talked about clay dividing walls. Or is it the same thing?
It's the same things. Parting walls and the parting lines and dividing walls are the same thing. Yep. She's going to be, in the end, she's going to be looking at you like this. She's going to be tipped way down, so that's why she seems to be looking up now, but she's going to be looking at you sort of bowed a little bit.
What? How tall is she going to be about?
She's going to be probably about 5'4" at her highest point.
John Dietrich said, at the 5 Points Fest, James Groman, Madball's creator, mentioned you sculpted the Giggly Eyes monster. What toys did you do?
Oh, that was the only one that I did on, on a soul level where it was just me.
Exclusively?
Exclusively, yeah. Bad choice of words. That was the only one that I did. And the rest, as I said, was mostly a team effort, The toy industry, as I remember it, was, like I said, there were art directors and there were us artists, and we would do a bunch of drawings, and like when I say a bunch, I mean 50, 60s, sheets of drawings after drawings after drawings, and then it was just meeting after meeting of sitting in a room with a bunch of art directors, and they would say, I like it better with this, and this nose is smaller or bigger, and it's been years since I've done it. Years. 80s. When I say years, it's like I was in the 80s. And but that's what I remember about it, and I was pretty opinionated.
Good night, Jim. Jim Berman said he's got to go.
All right, good night. Thanks for joining us, Jim. We'll talk to you soon.
Sandra Lira said, when the silicone fills the air hole and you clip the extra off, doesn't it leave a blemish, and how do you fix it?
I'm not sure what she means. Could you repeat that question again?
When the silicone fills the air hole and you clip the extra off, doesn't it leave a blemish, and how do you fix it?
Oh, I think she means a parting line. You have to clip the flange off the parting line. Are you talking about the flange, Sandra? Because that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
more complicated thing.
Well, I use these little nippy cutters. Oh, crap.
You don't have any out here?
They might be in that drawer.
Yeah,
That's it.
there you go.
These little guys, you get them at tool shops and stuff. They're for stripping wire, but they're also, when there's there would be a flange, and I would lay these right level on the sculpt and snip that flange and just keep clipping along. And then one of the things I like about Smooth On is they make a paint system that is a silicone, and you can mix up just the clear portion of that system without putting in any pigment, and make a paste using this stuff called thick Thivex, and it makes it so you can lay it up like shaving cream and just mix up a little bit of it, and then screed in any little holes and stuff, and it fills it in the way, almost like you bondo a pit in a car. It just does a really nice job, and it bonds well with platinum. I only use platinum cure silicone because it doesn't biodegrade like tin cure. Tin cure will continue to cure after it's cured, and it will keep curing until it gets kind of crumbly. Platinum does not do that. Platinum stays good.
Sandra Lear said the air hole that you drilled into the mold.
Oh yeah, just snip it off. If it's going to be it'll fill in that little thing, and you just snip it off level. You pick a spot where it's not going to be an issue. It's something you got to see rather than try to explain. But
Yeah.
I know what she's getting at. I just can't really.
Jen Ray said, were you in 2D animation or claymation? Neither.
Oh, neither. I built like Disney World style robots. Sorry, I didn't make that very clear, did I?
Jeannot Pinpin said, has someone ever hired you and they wanted to have their say regarding your artistic choices to the point you felt frustrated?
Yes. Yes. Oh boy, yes. And that's what led me to be the curmudgeon that I am today. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I recommend that for everyone. It's a learning curve. It's something that, it's something that I went through often. My whole career at Life Formations was mostly like that. Not all of it. I had a lot of good times, but there was a lot of art directors from other companies that were, telling me what to do, and it was very frustrating because the end result was not what I would think was very good, and but we made it happen, and it made me really appreciate where I am today. I can tell you that. I do recommend it for everybody. If it never rains, nothing grows, right?
Forgive me for mispronouncing anybody's name, but Giovanni Tejada maybe said, when you see one of your finished designs, do you think maybe I could change this?
Yes. That never goes away. Yes.
Mitchell McKeon said, do you use Dragon Skin or EcoFlex?
Dragon Skin. I have used EcoFlex for certain applications. for the most part, I like dragon skin. One of the reasons I like dragon skin so much is it's not so sensitive. It's got just the right durometer for what I need. But the other thing is it's not so sensitive to polyester and all that stuff. It still is if you're sloppy with that. But platinums as a whole have certain things that they should not be. They'll have cure inhibitions with. And dragon skin is the least sensitive of all of the platinums that I know of, where you don't have to worry so much about it. You know, if you get a little bit of something that contaminates your mold, it'll still cure. Whereas Ecoflex, if it comes within, if your grandmother wore latex gloves and you have her DNA, it won't cure.
But Mitchell McKeon said, I found dragon skin to be fickle with 99% IPA.
Oh, I don't know what that means. 99% IPA.
And
Yeah.
Droz Durden said, what's the main difference between dragon skin and super Sculpey? Oh, well, that's totally different.
Oh yeah, dragon skin is a rubber, and so Sculpey is it's a polymer clay. It's basically vinyl. Sculpey is made. It's a vinyl sculptable material. I don't know how else to describe it.
Which you use for your sculpting
Yeah,
process,
I don't
but
use
not
it ever as an
end.
end product. It
Yeah.
just gets me to a place where I'll make a mold of it, and that's that.
Oh, he's saying isopropyl alcohol.
Oh, yeah. What about the isopropyl alcohol?
That he found dragon skin to be fickle with a 99% isopropyl alcohol.
Oh, I never use isopropyl alcohol with it. That's probably.
Ryan McGuire said, dragon skin 10, 20, or 30. I found 10 to be more sensitive than the others.
I use just dragon skin 10 slow cure.
10 slow?
I can't remember. I got some down there. I can.
I'll go check.
Yeah.
Got some stuff in the way. Yeah, 10.
Okay. 10.
And you've got one that says 10 medium.
Yeah.
And he said he used it to smooth the surface of a mold and it didn't really set up. 10.
He used it right on the silicone?
I don't know. It says I used it to smooth the surface of a mold and it didn't really set up.
Oh, yeah, there was something wrong there. He had something that was causing the cure to inhibiting the cure, unfortunately.
Thank you, Tina Parsons. She said she loves the husband and wife team situation here.
Yeah, I if it wasn't for my wife, you guys, I'd be flipping burgers.
That's not true.
Yes, it is.
Mike Porter said, I'm surprised you used Sculpey. Would have thought a Chavant or Monster Clay for the size you work.
You know, it's funny. Everybody says that. And I have used Chavant before, and I've seen guys work incredible miracles with it. I hate it. I just hate it. I hate the way it works. It's not, and it's nothing against Chavant. The only reason I hate it is because I grew up with Sculpey. You know, it's like anything else. What you grow up with, you get used to, and you get to know, and it's like an old friend. And I just didn't have good luck with Chavant. That standing werewolf that I did some years back, it's on my website. It's a Lon Chaney werewolf. That head was sculpted in Chavant, and I was happy with the result because I was wanting to learn Chavant, but oh man, it was like 10 times harder than if I'd have done it with Sculpey, Super Sculpey. For me, it was.
Rommel Pink said, if you were doing a silicone mask instead of a bust, would you do Ecoflex or Dragon Skin?
Oh, I would do Ecoflex. I think that I got to know Rusty Slusher, you know, when he was alive, and I think that was what he used for everything was when he made those special effects masks that people were using to rob banks and everything. Those were Ecoflex.
Again, forgive me for the pronunciation, but Luis Bernachea said, do you use a vacuum or pressure chamber for any of your molding processes? And greetings from Patagonia, Argentina.
Yes, I do. You would laugh your butt off if you saw my system. What I did was I got vacuum pumps off of eBay, and I used a big PVC pipe for big sewer things, and I got end caps, and I screwed one end cap to a table, a small, like a picnic table style table, end table, and then I filled that a quarter of the way up with silicone to make the seal, and then I took the other end and put a big thick plexiglass window in it, and I plugged the hose into it and put the other end to the vacuum pump motors. I have 2 motors to get double the suction, and they have to pull 29 inches of mercury, and so I made sure that their specs said, yeah, we pulled that. And then, see, I've got to take out some foam now.
Giovanni Tejada said, what inspires you when you design? Do you think about it or you just do it?
It hits me at the damnedest times, you know, when I'm in the shower or something. It'll just, some image will, or I'll see something, you know, in a mall or on a cartoon. There's no one way to do it. Something hits you and you just go, oh my God, I got to do that. And it can be anywhere at any place. I don't really have a formula for that. It just happens.
Peter Tyndall says, also, I guess the translucency of Sculpey is similar to that of silicone, so it helps to visualize the final piece better?
Yes, yeah, that it does help. I think that's one of the reasons subconsciously that I chose Sculpey, is because there's a resemblance to flesh. The very first life-size pieces I did were made of Sculpey. They were the very first ones. I did a big, like a 9-foot Frankenstein. Had huge hands. And I did it in regular Sculpey, wasn't even Super Sculpey. And then I started using Super Sculpey, and I would heat that. I would do them over those plastic skulls. This is back when I was 22, 23 years old, and I would just heat it right on those old Revell plastic skull model kits, and that's how the first life-size pieces were made in my parents' garage.
Gio Sana said, have you ever worked with a 3D printer?
No.
And you'll give more thoughts on that?
Oh, I'm just looking at these eyes, and they're sticking out a little too far, which means I got to dig them out. This is what I'm talking about, guys. It's just gonna get it right. Let's get it right. So here we go. We're gonna dig deeper behind there.
So as far as a 3D printer, I guess you're more of the traditionalist.
Yeah, I just never really had the desire to, and nor did I have access. So that's the main thing is, you know, I know a lot of people work with them now. One of the things that I just really enjoy is just using my hands. So I just continue to use my hands for every part of the process. The thing about using your hands is that there's a lot of things that, sorry, I'm trying to stay focused on getting this eye right. Once I get one right, I can get the other right. I just didn't get them deep enough. I suffer from depression and all that other stuff. A lot of artists do. The more I talk to artists, the more I find that they get the blues sometimes and stuff. And one of the things I notice about when I get that way is I have to force myself to start working. But however, when I do start working and when I do start using my hands and get my hands engaged in clay like I'm doing right now, it takes that depression away. And I was just reading a couple of days ago how using your hands creatively, using your hands, not just doing something on a computer, but using your hands to create reduces cortisol production, the stress hormone in your brain. It reduces that. It literally makes that deflate a little bit inside your head, and it's really a lifesaver, you know. So when I get to a place where just things are really getting me down, and I just get some clay and start working to do something like this, it refocuses me, and I'm very lucky to be able to do this for a living because it's something that I love. And if I didn't have it, I don't know where I'd be, you know.
Let's see here. Mike Porter said, how did you get the life cast? The Michael Berryman is an odd one and he doesn't really need prosthetics.
eBay. I got all those over the years. I got them off of eBay. eBay was a great source for everything from clothing that I use to, I love those life casts. So I haven't gotten one in quite some time. I've had those for years. By the way, Michael Berryman, a lot of us are friends with him on Facebook, and he is an awesome dude.
Mitchell says, what do you release your mold with when pouring silicone into a silicone mold?
I do not use release. Silicone is its own release. And at least in the molds that I make. Here's one thing you should never ever do. You should never take your Sculpt and spray it with Zinsser shellac. If you want it to shine, if you're doing something where end product's going to be silicone, or you're making a silicone mold and you're using platinum cure silicone, there's something about Zinsser shellac. Comes in a yellow spray can, or you can paint it on, but that's a product, and there's something about that makes silicone stick like crazy to it. And there was a guy that sculpted a beautiful Batman bodysuit that he wanted to use. He made a silicone mold of it, and he wanted certain areas of it to be glossy, so he used Zinsser shellac. Then he poured the whole mother mold, or the bladder mold, inside a mother mold and it locked up like crazy. And that's how I make my fingernails stick. I spray the insides of my nails with Zinsser shellac and glue them on with silicone. They stick real well. I learned from that mistake that he made to do that. See how you learn these materials and people make mistakes, and then you go, oh, I can use that.
John Dietrich said, do you sculpt in silence or is music a part of the process?
I oftentimes have, like, you notice in front of me here, there's a big TV. See that big TV there? There's a big TV. Out in my garage, I have a little TV mounted on the wall. And I put in DVDs and stuff. A lot of the stuff I put on, I already know, like it's a movie I've already seen, or I'll watch The Sopranos all the way through. I just finished all of Breaking Bad, and I know it. I've seen it. So, but I was like, oh, this is a cool part, and so I'll stop what I'm doing and watch, you know, Tony Soprano beat the hell out of somebody. And then I'll go back to what I'm doing. And it's something that just sort of keeps me company out there. I don't listen to a lot of music while I work. And I hate to admit it, but we've lived here for 5 years and I still haven't set up the stereo out there. So that's my only excuse.
Back to the depression and stuff, a lot of people said they appreciate you mentioning that and they experience similar things. And Stephen Hickman said, hey, I'll bet painting might reduce cortisol too.
Oh yeah, that's what I mean. That's exactly what I mean.
Hi,
Painting,
Stephen.
sculpting, yeah, it's something you're doing with your physical hands that doesn't involve a mouse and a computer screen. The more people study that stuff, the more they're finding that too much time in front of the computer by whatever it is you're doing can do more harm than good, even creatively. And so I just like the tactile feeling of working in clay and seeing the results that I get from my own two hands and not a machine. So nothing against those who do it. I'm not saying you guys are cheating or anything. It's every bit as creatively rewarding as this is, I'm sure. And it takes every bit of skill, just on a different wavelength. It's just that this helps me just in general. It helps me to do it this way. Didn't mean to get into all that, but this happened.
Drowse Durden said, I heard when you paint silicone with an airbrush, you use Tolenol as a solvent?
No.
Wait, it says, is there another way of doing that?
Yes, yeah. The best solvent to use when painting silicone.
He's in Peru. He said here in Peru that solvent has restrictions.
Yes, and it does here too a lot of times. If you can get the best solvent for silicone is naphtha. And the best source for naphtha is Coleman stove fuel. I don't know if they sell it in Peru, but it's even lighter fluid is naphtha. White gas. Very, 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 with 10 more varies, flammable. Do not use it in smoke. You will die and you will kill your family. It is not the kind of thing you want to be around flames, but it makes wonderful solvent for silicone.
So use it in a ventilated
If you use it in a ventilated area, and do not use it where there's going to be a furnace and a pilot light or whatever, it's not that kind of thing. So
Steve Gibson says, what dictates a 2-part mold versus 3-part or more mold?
can you get it out of the mold? That's where experience comes in, because I have done that. I have sometimes I'll make a 3-part where the chin hooks way down, and so you got to remember you're pulling forward. And so if you have a core that's going to have to come down in that way, you're going to have a mold that pulls down, pulls up, pulls back. I've made 26-part molds before, and very complicated. One of the more complicated things that I've done was Medusa. So
The life-size
the
version,
life-size
full-body
Medusa,
version.
full-size version of Medusa. It had a lot of different parts to the mold, and so I had to make a lot of parting lines on there, and then make them so they all bolted together around an armature or around a core.
You were mentioning The Sopranos before as something you like to watch. Mike Porter says the new Sopranos show coming out with James Gandolfini's son playing a young Tony.
Oh,
I didn't know
it's going to be a movie, I think.
Oh,
I heard that they were making a movie, and it was going to be about the early days in the '60s when the Sopranos sort of ruled Jersey. His dad. I'm not sure if that's true. My version is true.
Peter Tyndall said, is there any one part of the process you enjoy the most, like sculpting, molding, casting, painting, etc.?
This right here, sculpting. Especially when, there's, 6 hours away from where I'm at right now will probably start to get fun for me. When I really see it start looking the way I want it to look. Right now, you struggle with it for a while. And I'm doing a little struggling. But I expect that. I mean, that's just how it is. Sometimes the struggle is part of the fun, because I'm just going to sit here for as long as it takes over the course of days with breaks to go to the bathroom and eat and get it till I got it. I'm going to keep doing it till I got it. And you guys probably won't see that because you don't want to sit here for that long watching me do this. But that's what I mean. That's what you have to do.
Okay, they're teasing about you saying several times that you were a weird kid, and they expected to hear more details about that. And then Jared said there's a great picture of you holding the baby orangutan.
Oh, well, that. We went to visit some neighbors, that moved away. They moved to Florida, and there was a place called Suncoast. At that time, it was an ape sanctuary for apes that were used in labs and circuses and stuff. And this guy, and my neighbor said, "Oh," and I was really into apes. I had a vast monkey collection of toys when I was a little kid. I just loved apes. I wanted to be Tarzan. When Planet of the Apes came out, I went ape shit for Planet of the Apes, as so many of us did that are that age, old enough to remember Roddy McDowell's, Cornelius. And I wanted the apes to beat the humans. I still want the apes to beat the humans. Anyway, she told us about that place, and we went there, and there was a wonderful guy whose granddaughter is now in charge of that place. And we went back to see that very same orangutan, whose name is Jewel. And I'm going to have to post a picture of my reuniting with Jewel just about 5 years ago, because I couldn't hold back the tears. She was a grandmother, and she had her daughter in there with her and her granddaughter. That same orangutan. I showed that lady that picture, and they all recognized her that had been there that long. And she was a little girl at that time too. And she goes, "Oh, let me take," and she cut off a lock of Jewel's hair. Jewel held her leg out for me, and she snipped off some leg hair that I still have and cherish, kept away in a little box, of that same orangutan from all those years ago.
Sandra McCauley is asking, do you have to cure the clay bake before casting?
Yes, with the heat gun. Just a paint stripper heat gun.
Sandra Lira, back to the Medusa, she said, so Medusa was cast all at once from 26 pieces, not in sections?
Oh no, I'm sorry. The 26 pieces was like an arbitrary number I threw out to illustrate that I have to do things oftentimes with more than 2 pieces, a lot of pieces. Yeah, she was cast and then put together. So I had her torso to her elbows and her head. And then what I did with the snakes was I sculpted the body portion of the snake, and I used quarters, nickels, and dimes to establish the thicknesses around her head so that there was this coiling around and then it would come off into a quarter. And I used that, and then when I cured everything, I popped the quarters and nickels and dimes off to establish The quarters meant the snake's mouths were going to be open. The nickels meant the snake's mouths were going to be closed, and the dimes were like a little of each. And they were establishing thicknesses for different thicknesses of the snakes. And then I poured up almost like a candle mold with a snake head of 5 snakes that I made, some with mouths open, some with mouths closed. And they were more like eels. And I poured up a bunch of those, and I poked a double wire through them, and then the quarters and nickels and stuff were used to establish the thicknesses, so I knew where to match it with what. And then I poked those things in and glued them and sealed their connection with the Psycho paint base. It got pretty involved, but I would be happy to show her next time I see her at a LuxCon or whatever, you know.
Kevin Merck said, Dear Diary, Tom Kuebler said, it's a struggle. Keep that in mind the next time you want to beat your head on the table when you've been moving clay for hours on end and can't seem to get there.
Yeah, it is. It's and then some guys can do it really fast, but you know, I've had stuff come together pretty quick sometimes, and other times I've spent days on it and it wasn't happening. But I would not get up from the table and give up. I would just kind of hang until it happened. See, like in this case, now I know what I did wrong, and I got to pull the other eye out and take it so it sinks in deep. Ooh, can you imagine doing this for real? All right.
Jeannot Pinpin said the picture of the old lady is way scarier than your sculpt. There's something gentle about the facial expression of your sculpt.
Well, I'm going to get there, and she's going to be, I mean, yeah, right now it looks a little or a little, you know, Norman Rockwell, but I'm going to get Mr. Hyde here before it's over. I don't know if I'll get there, you know, while we're talking now, but my intention is to make it look more like this, except she's going to have 2 eyes looking in the same direction as that. And down the road, you guys will see this piece complete.
Oh yeah, some people were asking before if you would post pictures later.
It's going to be a while because I have to get that monkey done first for the client. And one of the things I loved about this particular client was he said, I want a flying monkey. And I said, well, if I do you a flying monkey, it's going to be my flying monkey. And he goes, that's why I hired you, because I like your work. He saw my work in the Guillermo show, the At Home with Monsters thing, and he liked it. He said, I just want what you do, so if you do a flying monkey similar in some way to the one that you had before, I'd really like that. And so I said, all right. And so that's what we're doing. He's a nice guy.
Cindy DeGrasse said, are the eyes you're using acrylic or glass?
Acrylic. These are acrylic. I do use glass eyes from time to time, but these particular ones are acrylic. You notice I keep sort of pulling the sculpt down and looking squarely down at it. I want to be sure that one isn't poking out further than the other. I do a lot of that kind of thing.
Kurt Strubeck said, did you make the eyes for the Krampus? Remember those for the fiber optic?
Yeah, I did make those. Yeah, I made a mold of a set of these, and I used a crystal clear cast, and I had some fun with fiber optics in those. There was a little light in the thing. I don't know if probably Kurt did not see that firsthand, for real, but that light that's in the photograph is not Photoshop. That's a real light that's coming through I have a fiber optic pupil inside there. And that fiber optic went through the neck and down into a little plug-in night light kind of light, you know, a little sewing machine light bulb, so to speak, inside the body portion, the tree portion of the sculpt. And so you could throw a little switch and flip his eyes on, and they would almost shoot a beam of light across the room. They were really powerful and they were hypnotic. And I've done that a couple of times with sculpts, and I've had a lot of fun with fiber optics in the past.
When you were talking before about pulling the head forward and looking, I think that's what this is in reference to. Rommel Pink said further, so you go for asymmetry?
Well, there's certain things that, like eyes, that you want to get so that one's not sticking out further than the other, you know, because in most human beings that is the case. The eyes are equidistant coming out of their sockets. They're not, one's not bugging out and the other's resting deeper in. So at least I try to get that. But what I'm trying to do more than anything, symmetry is not a factor. It's not a conscious factor in my sculpting. What my conscious factor is, look at this, replicate it, and then make your changes accordingly. You know, the only reason these eyes are sitting in there right now is because I had to dig holes for those to sit in the armature initially, so I know where they're at. Does that make sense? What you looking for, sweetie?
Just kidding for me.
Oh, your battery's going.
No, just in case. I'm not sure.
Oh. Hey, you can plug in if you need to, right down there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mike Porter said, have you thought of doing a Marty Feldman Igor bust?
Actually, I did one for Liformations, and they used the shit out of it for all kinds of things. But yeah, I've sculpted Marty Feldman, and I did it 20 years ago. In fact, I'm sure they've changed a bunch of stuff out now, but I did a lot of the original stuff for Jekyll and Hyde's in New York, the Jekyll and Hyde restaurant. A lot of the original stuff that was in there was mine, done with Liformations.
Oh, that's cool, Kevin. Kevin Works said that's the best thing about Tom's work. His characters are kind and creepy. You want to chat with them, but not quite sure if they will suddenly bite your hand off at some point during the conversation. Totally twisted Rockwell. No one can pull it off like Tom.
You are awesome, dude. I'm so glad we got to meet and talk at the last Mass Fest. That was, you really made that trip for me. You really did. We got to do that again.
So we're at 2.5 hours. I guess you just kind of.
I'm just going to keep going, I guess.
You still have some watchers. Just.
Yeah. How many? Lots of them, or a little, or a few? Or...
almost 100.
Really?
Yeah.
God, I didn't think that. I thought I'd have like 8.
Thanks for more than 8 of you tuning in.
Yes. Appreciate it, guys. Really. Seriously.
Julia Powell. Hi, Julia. She said, thanks so much for doing this. It's such a thrill to watch you work. Miss you guys. Oh, we miss you too.
Yeah, and I still have some great photos of some of your great faces that you've made for me, and they are in my reference thing, and I will use them down the road. You might see yourself in little elements. Julia has one of those faces where she looks cute, and then suddenly she'll scare the shit out of you. She's awesome.
Lauren Wolf said, with regards to tilting the sculpt to check things, I have problems with depth perception. Are there any other suggestions or markers for checking that kind of thing?
Sometimes what I have done, like with the eyes, is I make sure I'll just Dremel right into the foam and put a board back there so I know that the eyes are running up against that same level board. Things like that I've done from time to time when I know I need to. I didn't think I would need it this time around, but apparently I must have. you know. I'll get it. It's not, it just takes, you know, over and over again, I can't repeat it enough. So much of sculpture is just practicing sculpture. You know, I've seen 100 different sculptors sculpt, and none of them sculpt the same way. They all have developed their own way of modeling things up. And everyone is just as valid as the last, even though they're very different. And the reason that they are is because the end result is there. You know, they get what they're after, and it looks beautiful. So that's, you know, that's the main thing. One of the guys I would really love to see do this is Tim Bruckner, because I look at his work and I go, God, that's like, you know, this guy defies gravity with his sculpts. I mean, he's got stuff flying in air. His anatomy is incredible, and it's graceful, and then they're like flying from like a billowing smoke, or they're, you know, and I don't know how the hell you do that as a sculptor. You make that kind of thing happen, but he gets this end result that looks like human hands could not have achieved it, and he does, and so I don't know. I think he ought to do one of these things just to, you know, if any of you guys have not seen Tim Bruckner's work, check it out. It's on Facebook. He's got his own website, Art Farm. It's pretty cool. You really should see it. He's been sculpting since I was a little kid, easily. He's done a lot of DC stuff.
Mark Davidson said, people put too much emphasis on the medium and not the philosophy of the method of working.
I agree with that. I'll never forget watching one of our painters at a LuxCon, and he was doing a painting demo, and it was Paytar, I think it was, and somebody, and what I loved about Paytar was he's just so right to the point about things, and he was talking about learning to paint, you know, as a young boy, and just that's all he wanted to do. And somebody mentioned, I wish I could remember how the conversation went, but they said, well, you know, I would like to get good, and I'm like 25 years old or something. And he basically said, well, then you are too late. You know, as if to say, you have to start this when you're young and practice like crazy, or you're just going to be an amateur all your life. And I don't know if that's true, because I've known some people that started sculpting later in life. I know that practice is the key. You just got to do it a lot, and you have to allow. You know, you're not going to get perfect right out of the chute. You just have to just do it a lot.
John Mazzano said, when you get to the final skin texture, how will you texture it?
You know what? Maybe I'll just do a couple of demonstrations about that. So it's by no means finished in any way, and I did not get to the ear I promised that I would get to, so let me just do that real quick. I use tools like this for ears, and there's another tool, like these ball tools. There it is. I welded a ball bearing onto the end of a broken tool, and this is my main ear making tool. It also has a Woodson spatula on the other end. Okay, so what I do first, making an ear, is I take a loopy tool and you get this little funnel inward. Where's that smaller loopy tool? Oh, I don't have it.
Are you still there, Steve Gibson? He's working on an ear for you.
Yeah, sorry, Steve. I get scatterbrained doing stuff like this because I get, okay. So you dig out that initial ditch in the ear, the one that leads into the eardrum, you know, and then you sort of spatula out. This outer thing funnels in and it dips down inside there. See? You see where? Okay.
Okay, Steve said yes, he's here.
All right, good. Okay, so, and then you just kind of define that inner place. All right? But here's one of the things that people always miss is, all right, I'm going to take my ball. It takes balls to do your ears. Is this guy goes into the tunnel. And a lot of people do crazy things with that. They just don't understand where that's going. I see more novice sculptors just not really look at an ear and follow that. This little trail runs around here and goes into the tunnel. And people do crazy stuff with that I just don't understand. And it's because they're not really looking carefully at the ear. So I start by getting that thing just roughed in. And then I define the outer portion of the ear. So that, and then you just keep finessing that until you have an ear. And loopy tools are sort of important. But then there's another issue with the ear, and that is, I always use Kara's ears. Turn your head sideways. And that is right in here. There is this little ditch that goes in there. Now, one thing that's important about ears is they are similar, but also very different. They're like fingerprints. Most people have fingers, but my fingers are fat and chubby, see, you know, fingers. And I know a lot of people who have really long, thin fingers. Ears are that way. Ears are different. You don't just, one ear does not one size fits all. So you got to remember that if you're doing an ear, you got to look at whose ear you're doing and follow that ear. But this is sort of a general way to get ears right, you know. So
You made that ball bearing tool, but where did you get these kind of tools for that?
Like for instance, this tool here, which is my smaller ball tool, this came out of a thing for cracking walnuts. It was a kit. It had a walnut cracker, and then you could pick the walnut out. I have a lot of tools that weren't meant to be used for this, that I've modified, I've hammered on, I've forged, there's all kinds of, and a lot of tools are made for sculpting, like that's obviously made. But there's some tools that just were not, and these ball tools, although I know they sell a lot of them. See, I just busted through because I'm talking too much. But that gives you the general idea of how to get an ear started. And then from there, you just finesse it down until you got your ear defined. I know guys that can get, what?
No.
Oh, the stink bug. It escaped the mold. That was that stink
They
bug that was
asked
in the
earlier,
mold.
they thought you crushed it into the mold.
Here, I'll just get it with the pliers. Sorry, dude. See, there it is.
Oh, stop.
Look at that. Ooh, it's gonna start stinking. These things are big. That was out in the garage, and we get a big population of those guys show up right in the fall times, and they're survivors, man. Those guys can live through anything. Ohio gets hit hard with stink bugs. They're harmless. They don't do nothing. If you step on them, they smell funny. But,
So people are thanking you for getting back to the ear here.
yeah. Okay. Now I was gonna do a little skin texture stuff, and one of the things, and I'll just demonstrate it on the side here. But just for kicks, this thing right here, one of these stencil brushes. They're not used for this. Normally they're for But I like to do this when I'm getting ready to do wrinkles or stuff like that. I take, now this is not saran wrap. I really like this stuff because it's thinner than saran wrap. It comes from the grocery stores when you go to get your fruit or your vegetables. You pull those bags, you know, off the roll. That's what these are. These are those bags off the roll. You see there, you know, this open this side. And then the reason I do this is because one, it makes a great texture with just the thing. But then when you go to do wrinkles within that, you can draw into this with a tool. So if I want to do wrinkles for like the forehead, you know, furrowed brow or something, and crisscross. And when you crisscross over a wrinkle, it doesn't, if you do it like that, see how it disturbs the original wrinkle? And you do this and it doesn't. So you can learn to use the saran wrap to create this kind of stuff, you know, this stuff right here, all of that. You can create that kind of stuff with this saran wrap technique and really, really bring it down to fine detail. You know, so that when you peel it off, and this is just a really rudimentary example of that, of what you get with that. And it's because I'm in a hurry doing it, but you get the general idea. And my advice would be just take some saran wrap and get a number of tools. I have, you know, these tools that with like a little bit of a point that swerves upward, like this one, you know, if you, something that doesn't grab the stuff, but something that skates across it, like a tool that, you know, like this, and where you can do nice curves and things like that after you've sort of tapped that down. And I use these kind of brushes when I'm doing a whole thing. If I want to do this whole head, oh, you know, this is for washing cars. And I saw this, I was like, oh man, look at that, you know. And so, you know, you do that, and once you got all that smooth, and you can just tap it lightly, and it just makes little, or you can really beat the shit out of it and get, you know. So this I use this a lot, believe it or not. I use this all over the place, and I've used it over saran wrap for large areas, like when I was doing the body surface for Medusa. And it gave me the beginnings of the surface that I could then draw wrinkles into. There was nice texture, and then I could draw wrinkles into that texture, and I could just go completely crazy with it, and had a good time doing it. And I got very realistic results. And so I'm finding stuff like that in, you know, hardware stores and flea markets and stuff. I get tools from everywhere. Anyway, what time we got?
A lot of people have said that they have used saran wrap but not tried the produce bags.
Yeah.
Mitchell said that Dick Smith used to use a texture stamp made from an old leather glove a lot.
Oh yeah, I mean, this, one of my favorite ones, this I got at Goodwill for $0.25. It was a lot better, but this was somebody's barbecue brush, and it got used against heat, so the things have curled back and stuff, but man, it makes some awesome, it makes this awesome, and I don't think you guys can see that, you know, but it makes awesome textures on clay, you know. And here's, like, for instance, Smooth On makes this stuff called Body Double. This is not it. This was some other stuff from Sinair, and it was called Nita Mold. But there's a lot of companies that make these two-part putty rubbers that you put the two A and B together, and it's a silicone that you knead together. And then when you press this into Sculpey, you can get really incredible results, you know, for certain areas. I'm just using this in general, but I don't, you know, you can't see that real well, I guess. There, you see that? It's a little bit better. You can see kind of what you can do. So,
Mitchell said, could you dissolve Sculpey down to a paste / liquid and spatter it on to get raised bumps like goose pimples on the surface?
I've never tried anything like that because I don't use any dilutants for Sculpey. I don't really use any solvents or anything. I like it just the way it is. A lot of people do, but I don't really like their results that much. So I don't have much experience, to be honest with you, with using anything that takes Sculpey out of its already existing state.
Matt Cable says, Tom, do you have a certain temperature you set your heat gun at when you go over a full-size sculpture?
No, the heat gun doesn't really give you that option that I use. It's a furniture stripping rudimentary basic heat gun that I got from some guy that was selling tools at a flea market, and they probably were lifted off some freight train. You know, I don't know where the hell he gets his stuff, but that's my heat gun. You know, and I basically just feel. You know what I do? I've learned from experience to move your heat gun very slowly. A lot of people do this, and that doesn't get it. You take your heat gun, you plant it about 1/2 or 2.5 inches above the surface, and you slowly move. And what you'll see is that surface will darken a little bit when you got it. And keep moving, or you're going to turn it black. So you just continue moving, but you move slow and evenly across your sculpture. And you'll learn from experience, you know. You'll make mistakes. You'll get toasted areas that get turned black all of a sudden. And it's one of those things that practice makes perfect.
Linda said that this look, I think she's talking about this, that it looks like crepe skin. Is that the orange peel one you showed before?
No, this is taken off of up there. See up on that, above the skeleton there's an orangutan up there next to the gorilla. Those are actual death masks taken off of apes. And there's a whole variety of skin on that orangutan. And when I first got that, before I put the finish on it to make it look like bronze, it was just a black plastic that they filled into their mold. And I got them from bone clones. And they had these wonderful skin textures all throughout. The glands on an orangutan are immense. Their faces are like 3 times the size of a human face. And there's all these wonderful textures around their cheeks and stuff. And I made a texture stamp of all of those different textures from that particular life cast there, because they're so conducive to skin, you know. So that's a close-up look of one of the areas of those big round glands around either side of the head.
Sophie Cartier said, do you ever use Vaseline or petroleum jelly to add unbaked Sculpey to baked Sculpey?
No, I just push unbaked Sculpey onto baked Sculpey and just use the old thumb pressure, you know. I don't often need to. I mean, I don't have to, you know, do a lot of addition to what's already been baked. I used to, but I don't do that so much anymore. So I'm gonna get rid of that wrinkle I just made. Anyway, this is still very rough, and it's going to be very rough for quite a ways yet. I got a ways to go before it's in any way looking like what I want it to look like. But I hope you guys got some good information for this. For what you guys want to do.
You're multitasking, so.
Yeah. It wouldn't be any different if I wasn't, though. I mean, it's a slow process. I guess what I'm trying to say is that, you know, a lot of people that want to do this or have been sculpting and get frustrated think that people who do it professionally just dive in and get wondrous results within the first 2 hours of their, and for me that's not true. Not at all. It's not true. It's still a serious effort, and it's still a lot of frustration going, what's wrong with this? What's wrong with this? And it really doesn't look like what I want it to look like. And I've been doing it since I was a kid, and I still have that with almost every single thing that I do. You got to struggle your way through until you get what you want. And you have to learn to enjoy the struggle.
A lot of people are saying this has been helpful.
I think they're getting tired.
Tom Enos said this was great, and Jared said that face has come a long way.
I'll tell you what, Tom, you watching you grow over the last 5 years, you have really, you've really blown my mind, dude. Your stuff is really looking good, and you've got a knack for this. Your likenesses are getting better with everything you do. You're really nailing it, you know. And some of those originals, those Pope sculptures that you've been working on, I just love them. They're really kick ass.
Jeannot said, how much sculpting time do you spend on a typical day then?
When I'm working on a sculpt, it's pretty much 8-10 hours. When I've got a sculpt, you know, when I'm working on the sculpt. Now, the sculpt is only part of the final piece. There's clothing, there's hair work, there's mold making. But when I'm working on the sculpt, I'm working on it for a big chunk of the day. Get up in the morning, eat breakfast, and go to work. Pause for a snack, pause for dinner, go back to work, watch Saturday Night Live while I'm sculpting. You know, it's ongoing. I don't really have a hard schedule about things.
Matt Scabelia said, do you prefer sitting or standing for those 10 hours of work?
Sitting. Yeah, I get varicose veins if I had to stand for all that.
Mitchell said, do you sculpt hands or cast them from someone?
Both. I've sculpted hands and casted them. I've casted Kara's hands.
For Cupie.
Yeah, Cupie. Cupie's got Kara's hands.
Can't get him to sculpt my face though.
Well, we can't mess with perfection.
Oh. We're a little slap happy here, folks.
Yeah.
It's almost 1 a.m. our time. I know some of you are in the wee hours.
God, it went by fast.
If yeah, Pete Tyndall's still out there. Oh my goodness. Pete, I can't believe you're still up.
I hope you don't have to work in the morning, Pete, do you?
He said, this has been amazing. Getting up at 3 a.m. was a small price to pay for such great insight into your workflow. I'm fully inspired. Thanks so much, Tom.
Thank you.
And thanks to Jared and Brandon for hosting. Yes, thank you guys for hosting all these. We've enjoyed seeing all the other demos and stuff too. From
Yeah.
people, so.
Yeah, I just, you know, Brandon and Jared, you guys are this sculpture thing that we love so much, like Alan Freed was to rock and roll. You know, I really appreciate you guys doing all that you do for us sculptors out there in all of our many forms. You know, because there's, you know, obviously what I do is so much different than maybe kit sculptors or, you know, and you guys celebrate all of it and make it so worthwhile. There's no ego in what you do, and that's what I love so much. There's no ego. I think I just figured out what's wrong with this.
What's that?
Well, I had the front portion of the cheeks too puffed out.
Yeah, it looks like it has the flatter cheeks if you look at the other photo.
Well, that's just the beginnings of what's wrong with it, but at least there's a start.
Chanel said, do you have characters where you used a picture of yourself as reference?
Oh, man. Yeah. There's a lot of me in a lot of my characters. If you look at the Krampus and you see me do that kind of thing, and you look at the eyes and like the Krampus, he's there. You know, he's there's a lot of me in the Krampus.
Ooh, that's scary looking.
Yeah. Brahm is where, you know, I used Brahm's Krampus as my format. That's one situation where I used another artist work, and I actually cleared it with him before I did it. You know, I was sitting with his wife at a lecture he was doing, and I turned to her and I said, do you think he'd mind? And before I could finish the sentence, she said, oh, you gotta do it. And he was showing the Krampus up on screen, so I went ahead and did it, and it was fun. That's if any of you haven't read Brahms' Krampus, you've got to read it. It brings a whole new element of fun to Christmas time. All right.
Fiona Campbell said, when you get to the costuming stages, do you construct and sew them yourself? And thank you both. It's been fascinating, she said. Thank you, Fiona.
Every so often I do. Most of the time it's found clothing that is altered or added to from other places, so I just start building on things. But most of the time that's what it is. It's clothing that I've found either on eBay or in Goodwill or someplace, and then I alter it to make it work with the character in whatever way I need to do that. See, this is where I start making these sweeping changes now. I'm starting to get a little bit more of a lightness.
I don't think you're going for the exact...
Not the exact, but I'm going for the mood.
Jared's mentioning how Virginia collaborated with Brahm on the Plucker.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Same kind of thing, yeah. Where I told him that I wanted to do it, you know, and he said, well, we could, you know, sort of, what was the word he used? It was...
cross-promote.
Cross-promote. And then, lo and behold, he did it. I showed him a picture of it at the end, and he went ahead and he put it in his book, which was such an honor for me, because I just think everything that guy does is gold. He's been such an inspiration. See now, see? And then you just sort of stumble into it. You go, oh, that's what happened. That's where I went wrong. And I'm starting to get a little bit more like what I
want. Suzanne Simo says, Tom, please turn the sculpt face onto the camera before ending tonight. Jared said that they collaborated with Brahm on a bronze Franklin Mint piece.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. Which piece, what was it?
I think there's a delay in the
Okay.
comments with that. Tina Parsons said, are there any tips on capturing the likeness of a person? Portraiture is such a struggle for me.
You know what I do? I get as much reference as I can. But one of the things, and I mentioned this earlier, and she just might not have been present when I mentioned it, was I will literally take, and this is not a picture of this, but if there's like a straight on version, I will take it and I will hold it visually. I will hold it till it adopts the size that your sculpt is. So if you guys can see me and the sculpt, I will bring the picture up to where I can look at it and look at them so that they're the same size in my line of vision. And then I can see how far the eye is from the end of the face, how far the tear duct is from the nose, how far down the face, in comparison with the actual photo. This is not a photo of this, but you get my drift. So I can, if I have the picture alongside the sculpt, and I make them about the same size in my vision, my line of vision. So I bring it up to where this head is the same size as the sculpt. And I can see where the eyes line up, where the nose lines up. All of those things. When I see that stuff setting right next to each other, it's like a huge eye opener. You know where you went wrong, you know where you got to correct. And I'll do the same thing if I can find a profile picture of that likeness, you know. I did a lot of that with Al Capone. There were a few good photographs taken of Al Capone. Mug shots are wonderful because that's what mug shots are for, was to tell the police, look for these features, turn to the side, turn to the front. So if you're doing criminals, you're gold. I did a lot with, there's not a whole lot of existing stuff on Poe. There's only 3 or 4 major photographs of Poe even in existence. And so I was doing 3/4 views where I was holding pictures up so they matched the size in my line of vision along with the head of Poe. And then when I would get it there, I would take careful note of what needed to move up, what needed to move sideways, how big the cheeks were, stuff like that. And that helps a lot for doing likeness. And even when you're doing small work, you know, I know a lot of, like Linda, you're doing doll-sized things, you know. That will help a lot if you're looking to get a likeness using cutouts of what you're trying to gain likeness.
Mitchell says, are you familiar with Amelia Rowcroft?
If I saw her work, if he's referring to an artist, but no, not by name.
So we're at 3 hours here.
Okay.
Oh, somebody else says she's great. Her course is awesome. Yeah, we'll have to look her up. I think I hear Pee-wee crying up there.
Aww.
Our poor dogs have to be up in the upstairs because we thought if they were down here they might be, I don't know, barking a lot and stuff. Not at this point, but early on. Warren Beaton says, Tom, my earliest inspirational memory back in the 60s was seeing a press picture of Disney technicians putting a whole Neanderthal skin into full body animatronic. Can you recall a single stark image early that may have affected your destiny?
Wow.
That's a good question.
Yeah, it is. And there's like a bunch of them. One of them was when I was a little kid. We were visiting, my grandparents had moved to Florida for a while, and we went to a museum there, and there was a Caravaggio there of David with Goliath's severed head. And I saw that, and I went home and I drew my own version of it. And I wish to God my mother kept that for the longest time. And when my parents passed away, it was a really kind of a rough time, and we lost a lot of stuff. and I know that picture was in there, but I was maybe 10 years old, and that was a significant time because it really left a. You can hear the dogs being let out. She's so happy to be free. Well, I don't know how much farther I want to take this, you guys. Do you want to tag Jeff Easley in this video? Oh yeah, Tom Enos. Yeah, cool. I'd like to see it again. I'm gonna have to look that up. All right. Well, I think my dog is kind of telling me it's time to quit. I really appreciate you guys joining me for this. This thing that the Shiflett brothers have put together, and I'll put my glasses back on so I can read the comments. And I think I'm gonna get. Does anybody have any burning questions? Okay, Simon Lee, that's awesome.
Where are you seeing it? Oops.
All right.
Shoot. Somebody said they popped in when it's ending because of the time zone difference.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know. I guess I could keep going, but I don't. It's not really going to change things for a while. Sometimes I have to get up and walk away from it, and then come back to it, and that helps a lot too. Oftentimes I will get up, I'll walk away, and then when I come back, what was wrong that I couldn't get my finger on is glaring. So anyway, thanks guys.
Yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in.
Thanks for joining me and my wife and my dogs and all that, and we're gonna wrap it up. And
thanks Brandon and Jared.
yeah. Thank you, Brandon and Jared, for this wonderful time, and we're gonna close. So take care, everybody.
Okay, hit that, and then you have to hit it harder.